petty revenge. The tiny inconveniences that I'd curse my worst enemy with. How about the moment they get in bed, they need water, and they don't remember if they've locked the door? Or if they have to pee every time they get comfortable in bed. You know, I'm middle-aged, and that just happens naturally once you get to this stage. I've got one. How about they feel intense empathy for the other person anytime they try to do something that's unfair or intentionally hurtful to them? Maybe that will even fix the problem. Saved passwords on all devices are always incorrect. So every time they sign into anything, they have to reset the password. There's always that one sock that just isn't right in their shoe. Or every other time they put their clean socks on, they always happen to step in some kind of water. Getting their sleeve caught in the handle whenever they pass the door. Last time that happened, I was incandescent with rage. It's a truly evil thing. It never happens when I'm in a good mood or even a neutral mood. It always happens when I'm in a bad mood, so I'm always on the verge of tearing either the door or my shirt off when it happens. Every time they wipe, it still smears, like Sisyphus if he took a crap. You know when you think you've plugged your phone, but the next day you find it at 10% because apparently it wasn't plugged in properly? Yeah, that. Itchy butthole every 30 minutes. Every time they think they've finally gotten rid of the hiccups, they hiccup one more time. They can't understand what anybody tells them the first time. It always has to be repeated. It doesn't matter if it's verbally told to them, if it's a TV show, or if it's in an email. It always has to be repeated. Honestly, I think someone's already cursed me with this one. At least the conversational part, like a quarter of the time. I do seem to have trouble understanding anyone who isn't talking the Queen's English slowly and loudly. And I wouldn't wish this on anyone, it seems to really annoy a lot of people. Reaction time of their electronic devices, like laptop or smartphone, is always 5 seconds to 5 minutes late, depending on how stressed they are. The more stress, the slower. Every time they get on YouTube, they're greeted with a 6-second ad that's skippable after 5 seconds. And ad block doesn't work. I mean, this already happens to me. Why do you hate me? Fingerprint or facial unlock doesn't work for the first 3 or 4 attempts every time. A different key on the keyboard becomes finicky every day. Sometimes it presses multiple times, and other times it doesn't press at all. Every seatbelt they try and use does that annoying lock thing when they pull. Every shopping cart has a wobbly wheel. And their windows are never streak-free after cleaning. Have their charger be just 1 inch too short for them to use their phone in bed while it's charging, forcing them to either just wait or sit on the floor. And to add to this, every charger is slightly defective, so it has to be at the perfect angle to charge. And that angle changes every time. They'll always be $1 short on all of their expenses. Except they find the $1 in pennies and then the cashier asks them to count it. How about whenever anything good happens to them, they wake up from a dream? They're always 1 minute late. 1 minute late catching the bus or train, 1 minute late to the birth of their kid, 1 minute late dropping the kids off, 1 minute late to a funeral, 1 minute late to their wedding, 1 minute late to appointments and meetings, 1 minute late picking up that call, 1 minute late to the toilet. Actually, if you cursed my partner with this, it would be a drastic improvement, apart from the toilet thing. To be perpetually stuck in that moment when you're about to sneeze, but to never get the satisfaction of actually sneezing. The traffic light turns to red just as they get there, or they always get stuck behind a really slow driver, or a driver that sticks exactly to the speed limit. They can never get the capture letters or pictures right. There's always a visible booger in their nose. Well, that's just torture for the person talking to them too, especially us short kings. They always have a cut on their tongue or one of those infected taste buds. Every time they wipe, they get duty on their hand. Every time they pee, they get some on their pants. Every time they try to plug in a USB, it's upside down. If it's right the first time, it doesn't fit. So the second time, it doesn't fit either, making for a minimum of 3 tries to get it right every single time. The bottom of their feet are always extremely itchy 5 minutes after they put on any footwear, boots, shoes, or sandals. Water that suddenly turns ice cold while having your daily shower. Unable to drink anything without spilling at least a little on themselves. Trip and almost fall but never actually fall, and there's always a witness who asks, "Are you okay?" To audibly and in an olfactory manner, toot in the most awkward time or place they encounter each day. Her eyeliner wings would never line up. A bird poops on them every time they step outside. They stub their little toe. A bug bite on the backside of the knee where it bends. Screw you, Chris Constable, you were never nice to me. May you be itchy forever. Delayed shipping on all Amazon Prime orders. So just the standard Prime experience then? It would be a different inconvenience every time. One day you just miss the bus, the next you're $1 short for everything you need to buy, the next you have a water leak, etc., etc. Okay, do the people posting here not know what a minor inconvenience is? I'd be raging with almost any of these. Or maybe I have issues. Mine would be pulling the wrong cable for the blind every single time, thinking it was the right one. Mine would be every time they brush their teeth, all of the teeth fall out and they swallow them, causing internal hemorrhaging and death. Also, their family is tortured and killed and their pets starve. Set their house on fire for good measure, but wait for the pets to starve. Every number 2 they'd take would be one of those ones that you need half a toilet roll to wipe. A pebble in their shoe that just won't get out and settles right under the big toe. An ingrown toenail on each foot. With every lie, they'd throw up, pee, and poo. The lack of commas here makes this a very vivid image. Oh my god, yeah. Are they throwing up, peeing, and pooing? Or when they throw up, is number 1 and 2 what's being excreted? Whoa. They'd run out of toilet paper every time they went. Tried to think of a person I know that I hate. I don't think I hate anyone I know, but I'd probably want them to accidentally bite the inside of their mouth once a day. Having hemorrhoids the day after eating really spicy food. Stubbing their pinky toe every 17 minutes and 32.7 seconds, and it alternates randomly which one gets stubbed. Everyone always either misspells or mispronounces their name, and each time it's off by just 1 letter. Getting toothpaste on their t-shirt every time they brush their teeth. They have a slight amount of anxiety every time they take a step outside their house. Their sleeve is always wet. Every time they try to pay for something on the card, it declines, and every time they pay in cash, they drop the coins. Painful leg cramp every night just as they fall asleep. Every time they're about to leave home, they suddenly can't find something important. Phone, wallet, keys, doesn't matter, but it's something they absolutely can't leave without. And it always takes them just long enough to find it that the anxiety of being late or it being lost somewhere outside the home kicks in, and when they do find it, it's in a place they've already thoroughly checked. So now they question their sanity and reality. You know, I was going to say craps his pants, but I think the guy I hate's already got that going on. Well, maybe that explains why he's been enough of a butthole to become your enemy. Honestly, anyone going through that is probably going to be too preoccupied to be completely courteous with everyone. Maybe he's already been cursed by someone else. Perhaps if you meet him without a loaded pair of undies, he'll be nicer. Every time they open the door to their house, a sparrow flies in. They do that little trip over your own feet stumble at the most inopportune time. Step on a Lego every morning. Excuse me, the question said minor inconvenience, not torture, you monster. Never be able to connect to Wi-Fi, ever. Every time they park their car, they get out and realize they need to get back in and move it. Breaking a nail every day would be a super annoying form of water torture, but I'm having a harder and harder time summoning actual hate for folks as I get older. Feels kinda like punching myself and hoping the other guy feels it. Yes, this. Spending your time and energy hating other people literally does more damage to yourself than the person you hate. Even if they know you hate them, they probably don't give a crap. ED. They bump into every single doorway, and hopefully that doorway leads to a very long set of stairs. They can never find the other sock. Having a microscopic-sized thread of lint stuck in the eye every day. Never hitting a green light, has to stop on red at every single stoplight they come to. I wish for them to win the lottery once a year for the rest of their lives, only for a new accident to destroy each ticket before redeeming. A dog eats it 1 year, then it gets thrown in with the laundry, falls into a campfire, flies out the open car window, and so on and so forth. In its essence, it's just a small inconvenience to lose out on the $2 lottery ticket purchase, but the amount of mental turmoil inflicted is level 1000. Every time an animal walks up to them for a pet, it walks away just as they reach down to pet them. Losing his phone the second he puts it down, or it being on 2% all the time because his phone caused me no end of grief. Nah, every time they plug their phone in, it only remains charging for 25% of the time. The other 75%, the connection isn't right, so what would take, say, an hour charge to get to 100% now takes 12 hours. Every pen has ink, but doesn't start right away when needed. Getting a foot caught in their leggings every single time. They find a roach or two crawl out of whatever they go to eat or drink, if possible. I want them to suffer that fate. To trap a piece of skin every time they zip up their fly? Oof! Well, they're currently waking up in prison, so I guess I'm okay with that outcome. They smell a weird smell and they can't find where it's coming from. Every pen they pick up writes well for like 2 letters and then dies. They feel like they have a hair on their tongue, but they can't get it. They get pee on the front of their pants when they pee and their jacket won't hide it. Forget to hint print before they walk over to the printer, so they have to go back to their desk, unlock their workstation, click print, and walk all the way back to the printer again. I could go on. A random shart when they're about to get busy with someone. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? Half a second audio to visual lag in all media. A mosquito buzzing around their head every night. That they realize they've left their phone at work, just after they've driven halfway home. Taste buds, but in their butthole. Eternal swamp butt. Their laundry always comes out smelling like wet dog, even after drying. I had something similar to this. I'd wash my clothes and they'd smell great. I'd put them in my wardrobe and the next time I wore them, they'd have like wet dog smell and I couldn't figure out what the frick was going on. I spent days washing everything. Not just once either. It still happened, but not as bad. Turns out my ex sprayed a fart spray or something similar in my wardrobe and it was stuck in the wood of that place. I literally lived this inconvenience and believe me, it wasn't slight. Can't hold in a toot, no way to hide. Business meeting? Rip that emission, baby. On a date? Guess what? Percussive blast. At a funeral? Too bad, time to turn heads. And it is always, always wet. Being allergic to pollen all year round and no amount of medication could suffice. Never wished allergies on my worst enemy until now. As the old Yiddish curse goes, may you lose all of your teeth but one, so that you can have a toothache. Hemorrhoids that itch. The crotch of every pair of pants fits weirdly, so their crack feels exposed every time they bend over, sit down, or anything. When they walk, they have a shimmy because the crotch is cut weird. Hyper self-awareness every time they're being selfish, unreasonable, or overall a jerk. She craps on herself randomly once a day. Can never tell when it's going to happen, so she has to wear a diaper. A little black curly hair in everything they eat. The taste of duty in their mouth all the time. To be name-called, to be made fun of, just once a day, every day, for the rest of their life, preferably by someone they think cares for them. 1 hole in a sock per day. They have a little kid that follows them around and tells them, "You're not Sigma." To have them wake up every day to a picture of me. That they fall out of their bed every single night. The chip in their debit card doesn't work, so everything they go to pay for they have to tap or insert and wait 3 times before they can swipe the strip. They still get what they're buying, but they have the constant feeling of holding up the line. Their phone can never pair with Bluetooth in their car, so they have to listen to the radio like a chump. Every doorknob has a small static charge and gives a painless but irritating shock. Every button they press has to be pressed multiple times before it works properly, and even after they figure it out, people are still going to suggest that they be patient after they press the first time. Almost every time they put on fresh socks, they immediately step in an unidentified cold puddle. Is it water? Is it pee? Cold tea? Cat throw up? Not every single time, but just often enough that they stand up and look around at the floor every time they put on socks. Stepping on Legos every time they get out of bed or take their shoes off. No matter how careful they might be, the moment they put their full weight down, a Lego would just appear. I suggest that Lego just start pretending and introduce the Lego caltrop already. That is genius, and then they could officially be a defense contractor too. Now there's a way to guarantee that you basically print money at the loss of some of your soul. Then we're halfway to the Lego private military corps that will one day rule over us all. They always stutter and mispronounce the names of countries. My mortal enemy gets behind someone at the checkout line who's paying with a dozen gift cards with tiny balances and a huge stack of coupons that won't scan, and the remainder by check, which that person doesn't even begin writing out until the final balance is determined. Someone's also behind my mortal enemy in line, meaning that they're trapped and just have to wait it out. They always stutter or mispronounce the names of countries. First, everything tastes exactly the same. Second, no one remembers their name. Then they stumble once a day. Then one eyebrow grows thicker than the other. When they go to the bathroom, they can shake all day, but the last drop will always end up in their pants. They climax at the word hello. They miss numbers in lists, and they have to look to check. A whistling booger that can't be blown. The people they love treat them like they treated me. Every grocery cart has a wobbly wheel. Night terrors. Always getting their clothes caught on door handles at the most inconvenient time. One absolutely rancid toot. Just once a day, randomly, they unleash the swamps of Dagobah. I'm talking eye-watering rancid stench you can almost taste on the air. People should be gagging on it. The dog should get up and leave the room. No holding it in. It just comes when it comes. A hair in their mouth multiple times per day. Every time they put dry socks on, they instantly step in a wet spot and have to deal with a soggy sock all day. Always having the feeling of having something stuck between their teeth after eating, that lasts for an hour or two. Hangnail on their index finger. Sleeves slip forward when washing their hands. One clogged nostril at all times. Permanent toothache or ear pain, possibly eye twitch forever. Dropping their coffee every time they go to take a first sip. Ooh, they can never find what they need. I need a spoon for my cereal, and they can only find forks. My phone's gonna die. All they have on hand is the wrong charger. My car is gonna run out of petrol. The garage only has diesel. Damn, I'm out of milk. And the shop only has double cream in stock. A single pebble in the shoe that no matter how many times they stop to shake it out, it's always there. Red light at every intersection. For them to always have some kind of wardrobe malfunction, a loose button that pops off unexpectedly, a zipper that constantly gets stuck or won't stay up, a strap of their brassiere that refuses to stay in place, shoes that squeak with every step, a sock that always slips down into the shoe, a hem that keeps unraveling, static cling that makes clothes stick awkwardly to the body, a tag that constantly pokes out or scratches their skin, tights that snag or rip, a strapless dress that keeps slipping down, shirt buttons that gape open, lint or pet hair that clings no matter how much they brush it off, and shoes that give blisters every time they're worn. Nausea, all day, every day. Their fitted bedsheet comes off while they're sleeping. IBS forever. To hear a positive comment about me at least once a day. Success is the best revenge. Diarrhea at the most inconvenient moment of the day. When is there ever a convenient time? A single hair across their face that they can't quite brush away. Their car has a slight rattle that they can't identify, even if they buy a new car. May your pasta sauce always be watery and never stick to the pasta. Every day, just once, she'd accidentally slip and tell the truth when she'd normally lie. Only a slight inconvenience for a good person. But unfortunately, the person I have in mind is not a good person, and this would bring down the house of cards she's spent 60 years building. Oopsies. Periods, especially if you're a guy. The outer skin of their Johnson keeps growing back tight. Always 5 minutes late to work. They always have a runny nose. Whenever that person sneezes, they go number 2. They have to navigate around Canada geese protecting their nests filled with newly laid eggs every day. That one spot they can't reach on their back always itches. Their food and drinks having slightly wrong temperature. Horrendous, unfixable BO. Screw you, Julia, you smelly witch. Every person he meets fails to be captured by his put-on charisma and fake charming personality. Every future boss he has is a non-white woman. Take that, you racist, sexist jerk. Gas pump asks more arbitrary questions the colder it gets. Every 10 degrees Fahrenheit colder it asks 2 more stupid questions before it actually lets you fill up. Being put in situations where they have to display kindness, manners, and consideration for another person. Ideally, someone who hasn't got something they can benefit from. You know, once a day for the rest of her life, I'd like for a random, different person to call her a toxic, rat-faced witch. I hope that red tie he wears in public always smells of Lindbergh cheese that was stored in a fat, unshowered, and sweaty, 2-week unwiped butt crevasse, wafting up to his nose and surrounding company. I don't really hate anyone, but if I did, it would be that they spill a cup of coffee on themselves every day. The twist is that it has to be a different cause each time. I'm talking some real Rube Goldberg machinations that the universe sets up for each day. Think Final Destination, only instead of death, it's a small coffee stain.
D&D players of Reddit, what is the most creative character you've seen someone play as? I once kidnapped a player character wizard and replaced them with a high-level illusion created by the BBEG. The player then had to control the illusion from the perspective of the BBEG. That's Big Bad Evil Guy, pretending to still be a member of the party. It was surprisingly effective. Just as they reached the BBEG, they were slowly realizing he wasn't helping much anymore. I played as a Wemmick back in college, and I loved that character. He was a druid, and thus could only carry wooden weapons. So, after thinking about it, I gave him a lance, and then proceeded to get every feat you could for a knight on horseback. Trample, charges, etc. I leveled like a monster class instead of a player class, aka slow as snails, but man, it was a hella fun character. He could do some insane damage by the end of the game, and if he had to get into close combat, he could do rake, bite for damage. My favorite part, though, were his 2 animal companions. The first was a weasel that took levels of thief. So it was our trap dismantler and eventually had vorpal front teeth, so it had a devastating bite attack. The second was, and I'm not kidding, a giant white blood cell. It had been magicked out of a giant and made even larger, and it rode around on my druid's back. As the group's healer, it would blob onto them and heal them with a few levels of cleric. Mind you, my druid was teamed up with the lizardman barbarian, who was surprisingly smart, and the fey bard that would drink anything put in front of him, which is how he ended up as a half-elf woman of a different alignment by the end of the game. The fey had a long-standing thing about drinking anything put in front of him. The campaign was heading to a big showdown between our ragtag group and what we thought was a terrible wizard. As it turned out, she was a high-level alchemist and had been using her potions to do much of her deeds. Unfortunately, when she was gone, all of her potions were sitting there and the Fae decided, why not? Then panicked when he changed gender and drank something else, then another, and kept rolling hysterically on this table the DM had whipped up. A camel. Not just any camel, but a racing camel named Rocket Boots. We had a party member who was inconsistent about showing up for the games, and he showed up in the middle of a short campaign we were running after we had received a stolen racing camel. It's hard to say exactly what it was, but the guy went ham role-playing this camel, making camel noises and doing camel things. It was absolutely hilarious. I haven't done it yet, but I've always wanted to play as a true polymorphed chair. The chair was turned into a human, or any player race, and then started learning, maybe becoming a wizard himself. I don't know how anyone would ever know since the change becomes permanent, but if he ever walked through an anti-magic field, he would just turn back into a chair and be gone forever, and no one else would walk through there for fear of being turned into a chair. I played with a 100% randomly generated character. I had a decent combo of class and race, half-elf and ranger, but my stats were completely dysfunctional for a ranger. My worst stats by far were dex and wisdom. In fact, they were the worst in the group. I was the ranger that could do everything a ranger was not supposed to do, and nothing that a ranger was actually supposed to do. For one campaign, I played a gnome illusionist and put all the points into alchemy. With my starting gold, which the DM gave us way too much, and few limitations, I bought a riding dog, 2 saddlebags of holding, and then another for my own carrying. I spent the rest of my gold on all the mundane gear you could possibly imagine. I used a spreadsheet to track it because the DM was irritated. I had 3 years of food and water, 3 tents, 10 cots, a collapsible bathtub, gnome-sized, everyone else can bring their own, a collapsible chair and desk for scribing scrolls, a portable alchemist lab, all manner of rope, poles, tools, containers, and even a few weapons. I packed trail cakes, fine wine, and a few pounds of honey. I think the only other magic items I took besides the bag of holding was a firestone. Don't recall the exact name, but it produced a fire from small campfire up to huge bonfire and renewed the item after 8 hours or so. I wish that campaign had gone on longer. I really enjoyed pulling random stuff out of my bag and then making the DM refer to the printed copy I had handed him 2 weeks ago, showing that yes, I did in fact have half a pound of marbles. Well, at least you didn't lose them. I gotta go. Bye-bye. My current campaign is made entirely from players who are new to D&D, myself included. So in building characters, my friend rolled mostly average stats, with the exception of intelligence, so he has a -3 in that. So we basically determined that he's illiterate. During our campaign, he also referred to the DM as God as a joke, and he kept asking questions like, "All right, God, what do we do about this?" So I made a joke that it looks like his character is actually communicating with God on a regular basis, but everyone around him just thinks he's insane and will never believe him. He then got the personality trait, Divine Guidance, which allows him to have a helpful hint once per campaign session. So canonically, his character can communicate with God, but to everyone else, he's just talking to himself as a result of his intellectual ineptitude. In plain English, a monk who fought everything by punching it repeatedly in the privates, Pathfinder monk with the maneuver master archetype who spammed dirty trick maneuvers. The look on the DM was priceless when they read the rules. Here's how it went. I tripped the tiger. Okay. Rolls the dice. Yep, the tiger's now prone. I elbow dropped the tiger in his fierce privates. Okay, so a regular unarmed strike. Oh, no. There are rules for that. No, there aren't. I beg to differ. The rules are this. You can attempt to hinder a foe in melee as a standard action. This maneuver covers any sort of situational attack that imposes a penalty on a foe for a short period of time. Examples include kicking sand into an opponent's face to blind him, pulling enemy's pants down to have his speed, or hitting a foe in a sensitive spot to make him sickened for a round. Huh. I guess you can punch the tiger in the privates. All the fights went from epic fantasy battles to this monk pocket sanding, private punching, and pantsing his way through every enemy. I don't know if there are any Joy Quest fans that are listeners to these kind of videos, but I was the dungeon master for Joy Quest, and I actually had a very similar situation to this. One of the players played literally as Jackie Chan, but he kind of named himself as like Jackie Chan. He actually had to fiddle around with this as well by implementing the way of the open hand in scenarios that weren't combat. So arm wrestling. So in one of the episodes, he actually tried to do like a bunch of different dexterity checks, and he tried to like slime and gum up his hands with a bunch of spit or some spilled ale, and basically try to cheat his way to the prize. Players. I've got a friend who is a weird character machine. Most recently is an orc named Sterog who believes that weapons are a coward's weapon, and beats people to their end with his shields. Before that was Robert the Destroyer, a barbarian who threw ladders at people. There was $3.50, or $3.50 to his friends, a really creepy monk who could shoot vines out of his hands like Spider-Man. Villigamish, a 5e warlock who halfway through a random goblin encounter realized he was terminating them for no reason and became a staunch defender of goblin rights. Harold the Great and Powerful was a bard who was absolutely useless, but invested everything in bluff and insisted he was a high-level wizard. Also had a penchant for buying people's souls and then pushing them towards positions of power. The Bear Witch Project, aka BWIP, or Bruce Berner, was a lycanthrope witch that spent most of his time in half-bear form. When asked what his gut feelings were on a topic, he responded with, "I have many feelings on guts." And of course, Justin Chandler, a shaman who saved literally all his gold till level 7, then used it to permanently enlarge and awaken his pet frog and deck it out with sweet gear. A player made a dwarf who was actually a very small human raised by dwarves. He was a barbarian and was modeled after Macho Man Randy Savage. He had a pet Wolverine, which he would throw at people screaming, "The fastball special!" The Wolverine didn't last too long. Randy, throughout the campaign, slowly went insane due to his fear of magic. Randy then began cutting people's hands off for no apparent reason, and the legend of Macho Man ended when he attempted to suplex a dragon. Suplexing a dragon. I mean, this sounds like an epic tale if you think about it. Just like this little man's like walking up this huge like ancient dragon just, "Mere mortals, they feared me for thousands of years. What will you do?" "I'll do like I always do. I'm gonna go in for that suplex. You need yourself a Slim Jim." And then unfortunately it's crushed. Wow, what a tale. It's been a long time, but as I remember it, my buddy was using Middle-earth as the setting. My character was an elf with polymorph abilities, hung out in Mirkwood, and while transformed as various woodland creatures, spied on passerby on behalf of Gladriel. Spending 100+ years in Mirkwood changed her into something a bit more enty. Not physically, just personality. Lazy. Likes to talk about trees. At this point, I wasn't tainted with min-maxing or metagaming, so I was more than content to make this weird, awesome elven forest woman with no social or combat skills and send her into an adventure based on subterfuge, navigating deserts, and combat. I was also interested in making an elven woman who wasn't the Tolkien archetype. More awkward, homely, blunt, super into trees and tree stuff, and not the usual, "let's make dope skyscrapers out of these redwoods" way, but more like, "let me tell you which tree sap tastes best right off the bark." So she ended up being whisked away, reassigned to an adventure in the east past Mordor, in a desert where, according to the DM, Tolkien's mentioned in only one paragraph, blue wizards were hiding. She was very upset with her reassignment. Over the course of the adventure, because wizards, she got stuck as a parrot, rode another character's shoulders. Perfect disguise. Lots of scouting, lots of complaining about not being in Mirkwood, and also being a parrot. Many Mirkwood facts, Mirkwood reminiscences, drawing maps of Mirkwood in the sand with a talon. The entire time, I had her advising the party that returning to Mirkwood would be the best option. That said, when the enemy least expected it, BAM! Sleep mist and trash talk punctuated with WAX! Surprisingly effective. We never finished the campaign, so I like to imagine she just abandoned them at some point, and there's a colorful parrot flying happily around Mirkwood, perching on a character who's actually from Mirkwood, not Treebeard, who I've been reminded is from Fangorn. See, all I know is Mirkwood squawk, nothing else. It was fun to think about this again after all this time. Now I'm probably going to remake her as an important NPC in my new wilderness adventure-based campaign. I don't know why, but for some reason when I imagine this like very chill elven woman who's just so attached to the forest, whenever she's like in like this parrot form, I just picture Iago. So like, can you imagine like that change between just like, "Hello, I am an old elven woman here to guide you on your path back to Mirkwood," to, "Hey, you know what? I don't like being a parrot. This is ridiculous. Hey, let's go back to Mirkwood and check out the tree bark, huh? Blah!" I once played a game where the players did not know any of their stats. Everything was run by descriptions like, "you're really good at getting into places that you shouldn't," picklock skill, or "you're bleeding from several wounds and are nearly at death's door." If it were that kind of game, the players wouldn't necessarily know where they were. By the way, it was the best campaign I'd ever been a part of. The GM was a freaking genius. We were in the Marines together, and he got orders to go to Korea. When he came back, he no longer played and wouldn't associate with us nerds anymore. Dude was a natural, and I never found out just what happened. All I know is he didn't find religion, as suggested. I think he was met with anti-nerd peer pressure, which is funny because the nerds were also Marines, so there it is. A thief with one level of illusionist that passed himself off as an arch-wizard, throwing fireballs and screaming, "These beasts are immune to magic!" Ooh! In a fight, which was a funny experience. He was good at scamming NPCs, though. My character is similar to that, a thief that pretends that what he does is all magic. We were supposed to be infiltrating a cult that was gathering a presence in this town. The other people in my party joined the guard, and I was going to investigate the city's criminal underworld. And then I got distracted and ended up convincing a bunch of people of my magical power and how I can make them as good as me. So I became the kingpin of the criminal element in the city. It ended up not helping us find the cultists at all. But when we found them, I had an army. A necromancer who thought they were a cleric. Only the player and DM knew and had a list translating what the player said they were doing and what they were actually doing, i.e. spells, daily prep, so the others wouldn't catch on out of character. In his formative years, he came upon a book of forbidden spells. Being young and stupid, he assumed it was a book of divine rituals. Fast forward several years, and he wanders the land preaching about the everlasting life. He's skilled in first aid and potions because not every scrape requires divine intervention, but has some spells that will bring someone back from the brink of death. He also has a bodyguard who wears full plate armor, who follows him around because he owes a life debt. Doesn't talk much, though. The other players never discussed removing their own armor, or eating, or using the bathroom, so nobody found it odd that the NPC never did. The other players also never took points in Knowledge Arcane to discover the spell effects that didn't match what they should. Unfortunately, he got found out when one of the party members went down, and he turned them into a zombie. The players were then in on the joke and weren't able to separate what they knew and what their characters knew, which is why they weren't told from the start. If the party member hadn't gone down, there was a plan to have a personal quest, in a trial of faith style, to see if he could unintentionally turn himself into a lich, and if the party would help him do so. Mimic companions are what made me fall in love with the concept of tabletops and random chance. Just messing around with a friend of mine, he happened upon a mimic, fed it a live fairy that was annoying him, and it became his friend for life. That mimic NPC rolled natural 20s like it was his freaking job, and honestly, single-handedly carried the party, with a bit of help from a sentient severed goblin hand, for the rest of the series. All the players had terrible rolls for hours, and just sat in wonder while Mimic and Handy wrecked a Lich Dragon. All hail the mighty luggage. There was a campaign where the party came across a magical cauldron filled with boiling gold. They were told they could drop an item in and it would be turned to gold while retaining all of its other properties and be imbued with intelligence. They were warned that the said intelligence might be malevolent. While the party debated what to drop in, the gnome rogue jumps in. He became gold-coated, which increased his armor class significantly, but also became cursed with an evil alter ego. There was much rolling to determine when and for how long he was forced to play as chaotic evil. I played a human fighter. He was a carpenter, had a wife and children. He was a really kind man, so kind in fact, he didn't carry a weapon. He was non-violent. His flaw, however, was that he had a massive malignant brain tumor pressing on his amygdala. Since they didn't have CAT scans in this universe, no one knew that he had inoperable brain cancer. Whenever our party was in a situation that caused great stress, like combat for example, my character would slip into a sort of trance and go on a rampage in the battlefield. He was absolutely stacked in combat, so he would absolutely clean the hell up when it hit the fan. the gentle carpenter would turn into a snarling, mumbling maniac who royally crapped on anyone who dared oppose him. He would come out of the trance with no memory of the fighting. Since he didn't carry a weapon, this required some creativity, so I made my character a master of improvised weaponry. Before combat, I would ask the DM if there was anything in the room I could lift above my head. Whatever was nearest is what I used as a weapon. Chair, stones, dead enemy's femur, you name it. My character was a whirlwind of bottles, debris, and the occasional small animal. A true force to be reckoned with. His name was Buin the Machine Rodriguez. Buin? I mean, I'm still invested. This is a very cool character concept, kind of like a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde scenario, but like with like actual medical knowledge behind it. But the name Buin throws me off. Is that like a short term for like brain, I guess? But I just can't help to be like, my name is Buin the Machine Rodriguez. So, you want me to use my fists, huh?
Students of Reddit, what's the story of the worst teacher you ever had? Had a science teacher that insisted cells were not made of atoms, and that therefore either leaves weren't alive or diamonds were. When I was at primary school, for ages I think around 7 or 8 till 11 in the UK, we had a class on human reproduction education. A kid asked the teacher about female eggs and how that works, only for her to scream at him that women do not have eggs and not to be stupid. Screw you, Brighton Junior School. This was about my class in the 9th grade. We were about 15 or 16 then. We had chemistry and we were learning about atoms and molecules. Almost everyone in class thought there was a molecule for everything, like a strawberry molecule for example. Then when I pointed out that they must have misunderstood it all, they acted like I was dumb or something. Look at stupid Brenda over here doesn't understand that there's a strawberry molecule. I had a math teacher who would leave the class to ask another teacher how to do certain math problems. Sometimes he'd be gone as long as 30 minutes during a 50-minute class period. Suffice to say, no one in that class learned much math. If it makes you feel any better, the teacher probably was given the class against his wishes. Math classes are often very hard to fill, particularly since they are a challenging set of skills for not much pay, compared to other opportunities. As such, schools sometimes ask unqualified people to teach math class because they need someone. I can confirm, I was supposed to teach math one year, and the school called me on a Friday before school started and informed me that they needed me to teach science instead, and if I could please come in over the weekend to set up my lab. Do you know how much prep should go into a successful year of science? You basically should set up your curriculum in advance, plan out all the lab exercises, lobby your school for the money, and order all the supplies. You can't just walk in and wing a year of science with 130 kids when you've never taught the subject before. As you can tell, I'm not bitter at all. All of these stories remind me of how bad substitute teachers are. Like, I think my old high school just got random people off the streets to teach. I once had a sub who wore doctor's hairnets over his shoes and asked me what I wanted to be in life. When I said I wanted to make films, he laughed in my face and said that's not happening. Education is a joke in the States. My English lit professor was late to class every day. She was clearly on substances. On top of that, she didn't even shower. Her hair was matted, and she was so rude. She gave us homework and never took it up or graded it, and then would show up and say it's test day with no warning. I had to drop the class after I failed the first test. I believe most of the class dropped after that exam as well, and she didn't come back next semester. I mean, if she was on substances, then clearly the English class was pretty lit. One time while taking an exam in my Calculus 2 class, I got a random bloody nose that dripped right onto the test. After explaining what happened, my teacher said if I leave the room to go clean up, I wouldn't be able to retake the test. My options were to grab another test and start over halfway through without being able to copy my previous answers, or leave and fail the exam. I walked out of the classroom and withdrew before I even got to my car. You should have bled all over the test and handed it in. And with that evidence, if they kept it, went to the dean or someone else in administration. I have steady nosebleeds of up to a minute every now and then, and that's while lying down. I honestly couldn't take the chance of continuing to write while I bled for just a gotcha moment with a jerk teacher. FYI, as a nosebleeder myself, don't lay down when you got one. In case you didn't know, tilting your head back is also a lie. Both things just make it worse. This is about my Welsh professor. She assigned textbooks that were out of print, couldn't explain anything to save her life, responded to questions by repeating herself, and her syllabus was just header info and a single line that said, "The purpose of this class is to learn Welsh." In the 2nd grade, had a cool girl named Deja in my class. Our class made a joke where we'd say Deja and then boo in a loud and deep voice. The teacher was super ticked off and took Deja's bag, the rectangular one with the 2 metal bars on the back, and slammed it against her back. I heard the most blood-curdling scream of all time, and the whole class just fell silent. I don't know what happened to the teacher since that was near the end of the year and I moved away after that school year ended, for unrelated purposes. The teacher physically assaulted Deja because y'all made a joke about her name? Holy freak. Yeah, I felt so bad for Deja and the memory keeps coming back to me sometimes. I don't know why I think about it, I just do. Hearing that story made me really think that I probably would have taken part in that joke because saying Deja boo sounds kinda cool. But I could see how it would suck if you didn't like the joke. I was once humiliated by my teacher because the guy I had a crush on was in another class came into our classroom to ask my teacher something. A lot of my classmates started giggling and one of them called my name for several desks away, as if I possibly didn't notice that my crush had entered the room. I was the one that ended up getting in trouble and the teacher threatened to send me into my crush's class and have everyone laugh at me, even though I hadn't said or done anything besides go bright red. My bad for having friends who knew I liked a boy, I guess. Not saying what happened was right, but I'm embarrassed as freak by everyone's behavior. I wouldn't wish any aspect of this situation on anybody, but God, that teacher hated me. This was a gym teacher. The other kids would often bully me and sometimes beat me up. She would only intervene if I fought back, and that was to punish me and me alone. I went to the guidance counselor one time after getting kicked out and told him what happened. He called her and she said I was the one attacking them and they did nothing, since she was the teacher and I was the student. You can guess who the guidance counselor believed. This was my entire elementary school life. I could have 6 jerks pushing me around, calling me names, hitting me, trying to pants me, etc. That's all fine. Throw one punch and break their nose, detention for a week. Literally had the exact same thing happen to me as well. I would get ISS, in-school suspension, and the other girl would get nothing. I am also a girl, but I was a very tall 12-year-old. So whenever I would fight back, they would assume I caused more damage, even though I was the one being picked on and did not start the fight and was only defending myself. Years later, my mom said they wanted to permanently suspend me, but she threatened to sue them since they admitted to her that I was the one being bullied and couldn't do anything about it in writing. Good thing though is the ISS teacher was very nice to me and would let me do whatever I wanted as long as I did all my homework and stayed quiet. Got a lot of good quality reading done. I had the opposite effect with teachers in school. Every time I was about to get into a fight, one magically appeared. I remembered one time I was in gym and this kid was walking up to me, ready to fight me, and my math teacher showed up out of nowhere and stopped us. It's like she had instant transmission. A teacher once told me that sand was a liquid because you could pour it. I then raised my hand and told her that if you had enough big containers, you could pour bowling balls. The class laughed and about 10 minutes later I sneezed. She thought I said BS and sent me to the principal's office. The worst teacher I ever had was my shop/gym teacher in high school. He would not do anything at all. I was able to smoke in shop class and in gym as long as I was outside running laps or something. I never once heard him tell anyone about safety measures when using shop equipment. A few people got hurt and one actually lost half a thumb, but the worst thing he ever did was hire some of the grade 9 and grade 10 girls to babysit for him and his wife. He would leave his wife at the bar and go home to check on the kids, and was eventually caught hooking up with one of them. After a police investigation, they found a ton of homemade content on his laptop of him hooking up with these girls. Last I heard, he went to jail for life. This was all in a town of less than 300 people. Similar thing happened to a hall monitor I knew. Dude went on to be a coach at another school and was apparently doing pretty well. Threw it all away because he started to date a student. What an idiot. In the 5th grade, I had a teacher who disliked me because I was bullied a lot and she had to take care of it and talk to my parents a lot. One day I was playing kickball and got borderline assaulted by some kids, and she saw, came over, and let them go inside. She looked at me covered in dirt and said, "Don't go telling your dad about this." Next day, my dad went into the school and had a very long talk with this teacher and the principal. I'm pretty sure she was hoping the school year would end sooner. Damn, I had the same teacher in the same grade who would never stop screaming at one student named Nate. I ended up kind of becoming friends with him, but didn't see him much after 7th grade. It got to the point where it seemed like she would go out of her way to find some reason to scream at him. She even screamed at him when some student smuggled a staple gun into the lunchroom and began firing it at Nate, claiming he was doing horseplay or something. The kid with the staple gun got away scot-free. Same kid also hit me with the rubber band next year until I almost cursed. Luckily, my teacher was really friendly and said, "Well, I would have too. That really hurts." I had a computer science teacher who didn't really teach the class. First day of school, he stood up and said, "I'm going to be honest with you guys. We're going to be learning this material together." He then pushed us all into online code camps. The beginning of every class, he also spent about the first 20 minutes going over anything under the sun except for programming. If your phone went off at any point during class, he said that you had to buy the entire class donuts, but he was exempt from this rule. My programming teacher also had similar teaching strategies. The first day he said, "You guys will just be learning on codes and I'm gonna monitor you." He then proceeded to play the Winnie the Pooh baseball video game every class, even promising kids A's if they could beat it on the hardest difficulty, as the rest of us struggled to actually program. First off, where can I play Winnie the Pooh baseball, because I always hear about that game? And secondly, my economics teacher in college had the same rule about donuts. His phone actually went off once and the whole class was like, "Ooh," and he bought us donuts the next class. It was awesome. Some crazy substitute we had for geography hit the computer monitor to the floor because of a fly. It landed beside me and I nudged it off with my paper. My elbow knocked the dictionary off the table and I was, and I quote, "isolated from class for throwing a dictionary across the room." I was pissed off. When I was in kindergarten, my first teacher got pregnant, so she had to take maternity leave. She then got replaced with a substitute teacher to teach my class for the rest of the school year. She was very strict and she was not very nice. I had issues with her, but I was a very good student, quiet and to myself. One day I asked her that I had to use the bathroom, but she refused to let me go. I really had to go, but ended up peeing myself. I remember going to the nurse and they called my mom. My mom went to the school and had a meeting with the teacher, the principal, and someone else. 2 days later, that teacher was fired. At least she didn't do the, "I don't know, can you?" bit when you asked to go to the bathroom. Every time a teacher did that, I wish I peed myself. I remember my 4th grade teacher, Mrs. Doge, being super strict. She was pregnant and took maternity leave. The substitute was the nicest teacher ever, and she was appalled that Mrs. Doge had never read us a single book. When I was in the 9th grade, the school I went to could not afford enough books for everyone in the English classes to have a copy to take home. They only had like 30 copies and they had like 4 classes of 25 students. So what they did was have us read in class. But rather than have each of us read to ourselves, the teacher read to us. I think this was because they wanted the entire class to be at the same place in the book. This was the 9th grade. It was a little insulting, in my opinion, to have the teacher read to us. The teacher quickly realized that it's no fun reading the same chapter to 25 students 4 times a day. So she brought a tape recorder and would record herself reading to the first class. The 3 other classes got to sit there and listen to the recording of her reading the chapter while she sat at her desk doing God knows what. I've never been one of those who liked wasting time, so I went to the library and checked out a copy of whatever book we were reading and would read it at home. I would finish it in a couple of nights, whereas it would take a week or more to have it read to us in class. The English class was my second to last class of the day, so I would use that time to do homework from my other classes that day. Ideally, not to have any work to do after school. An English teacher I had in high school asked the class to spend half of the class in the library, finding a love poem. I chose Sonnet 130 by Shakespeare. It's not your standard love poem. It says nothing nice about the lady until the very end. She failed me on the project. The very next project was to choose a poem that described our general feelings around the time. I chose a poem from the Existentialists. I don't recall exactly which one, but it was about bad thoughts, if you catch my drift. Again, I failed the project. I never forgot her response after I read it aloud. "Why would you choose something so awful and sad?" A girl in the class said, "Maybe that's how he feels." She sent me to the principal's office for punishment. By the end of that year, I was in the mental hospital for acting on those bad thoughts. I was there for 3 months. I feel bad for the OP in this story. I had an English teacher that failed me because I used the words explosions in the sky for a poem, and she told me I plagiarized because that was the name of a band. My next poem was about how my English teacher sucked, and I got a passing grade. I was so confused. In middle school, I'm in college now, I had the displeasure of experiencing a married math/humanities teacher duo who were horrible people and took their relationship issues out on their students. The math teacher was just extremely freaking weird and would go on strange rants, scream, and clip her toenails in class, and clip her nails in class. This happened during a test once. The only sound that could be heard was pencil scratching and the clipping of her nails. I still remember it and shudder. She also made up ridiculously hard to follow technical rules about formatting that would ruin your grade and even put you in detention if you didn't follow them correctly, like drawing the exact margins on homework, boxing answers, and getting all of your work signed by a parent. I was a good kid, but went to detention for the first time that year. Eventually, half the class was in and out of detention every week. Worst of all, she seemed to single out her students to torment at random. I, a small, shy, emo Hispanic girl, was her favorite target. I remember her once yelling at me in class to the point of making me cry for fidgeting with my eraser. She described it as playing with dirt. She brought it up relentlessly in class for a month, calling me dirty in front of my classmates. The worst thing is that when she saw my friend eating a cookie in the hall, for some reason, she absolutely flipped her lid and tried to force her to spit the cookie into her hand because eating in the hall was not allowed, a rule that was never enforced. My friend apologized but naturally refused, swallowing the cookie that was already in her mouth, and thought that was that. The teacher continued to scream at her, got her detention, and tried to get her suspended. Her husband was the humanities teacher. Think history, current events, and social studies. He was, to put it lightly, a blatant racist. When we talked about the Holocaust or the slave trade, he would ham-fistedly point out the Jewish or black kids in the class and basically be like, "Just like your ancestors," and keep bringing up the kids as examples despite clearly making them uncomfortable. This wasn't even the most blatantly offensive part. During parent-teacher conferences, he literally told my mom, an immigrant, and myself to our faces that I was late and often valued socialization over hard work because I was a Latina. He said something along the lines of, "Just because it's okay in your culture doesn't make it okay here. I taught in Costa Rica once. I should know." I was a meticulous worker who would chat with friends here and there, but not excessively, which of course wasn't the most messed up part about his statement. Me and my mother were speechless, and she didn't say anything, but there was tears in her eyes, and she was understandably mortified and angry. His words hurt me, but it hurt most of all to see her like that and feel so helpless. They both continuously berated me in class and gave me unreasonably bad grades. I was a quiet, extremely shy, hardworking kid, known for being a bit of a goody two-shoes. Before their classes, I never had any academic difficulty, and humanities was my favorite subject. After a while, I shrunk completely. I stopped trying in both of their classes. I was so ashamed, frustrated, and scared of them. My already low self-esteem dropped considerably, and my anxiety in the class situations worsened. Although I consider myself to be quite intelligent and was able to still get A's after their classes, all throughout high school, I retained any aversion to speaking to my teachers and contributing in class, causing my academic life to suffer quite a bit. So Mr. and Mrs. Penn, F you, and I'm glad you got fired and divorced. I hated teachers like this, and being a kid who spoke up, I often got in trouble. I once told my film teacher that he was ruining people's projects with his input. For example, one kid had this dramatic film that was supposed to end with a murder scene. Our teacher thought it would be better if the guy was tied up and had syrup poured on him. It was the stupidest idea ever. Oh, and he loved adding fart jokes to everything. My second grade teacher was Sister Bridget. She didn't like me at all. One day I was feeling ill, and I asked to use the restroom. She told me I was lying, as she tried to tell me why I was a liar, which led me to vomit all over her shoes. Maybe it was a holy vomit. Okay, maybe not the worst teacher, but definitely the strangest. Mr. Pratt. He was a substitute teacher I had in high school in the 90s. Inner city school, he was an older black dude with a loud mouth. There were a lot of jerk students though, who always mouthed back to every teacher, which made learning difficult. Mr. Pratt had an odd choice when responding to these kids. Imagine a well-dressed but definitely urban-sounding substitute who, when a student tried to act out, would pull out a freaking puppet. Obviously custom made and looked just like him, suit and all, out of his desk. He would then start berating the student via the puppet. The puppet was called Pratt Daddy, by the way. He would make the student talk to the puppet and apologize. Most didn't. They were laughing and tried to talk over Pratt Daddy, in which case Pratt Daddy, the puppet, would kick them out of class and lock the door. Then the puppet went back into the desk drawer and Mr. Pratt continued his lessons. It was odd. I feel like that is something you would have seen on a sitcom. But Pratt Daddy would have probably hit the students with a stick. My former tutor for year 9, also the art teacher, she refused to take action when somebody created a Snapchat account under my name and sent unclothed images to dozens of people around my school. Shortly after this, I got into a fight because a guy was still pissed about the Snapchat situation and punched me in the jaw when I had a retainer. From this, she decided to secretly send loads of emails to my mother suggesting that I, more than likely, have autism. I have since basically been forced into getting checked up on, only for doctors to confirm that I don't have enough symptoms for a diagnosis. She treated me really poorly in the art lessons and did very little to get involved with me when I reported or got witness being bullied.
Parents with nanny cams, what have you caught your babysitter doing? This was my equivalent of pre-kindergarten. All the kids were regressing in their movement ability and getting really fat, so they set up spy equipment. Turns out one carer was doubling every baby's food portions and forcefully overfeeding them. Wish I had a nanny cam. My stepsister was watching my brother with disabilities for me. She would dump out the contents of his capsules meds and use them later. Didn't find out about it until he started having seizures constantly and ended up in the hospital for the second time. This isn't a bad one. My parents caught the babysitter carrying our 60-pound golden retriever like he was a baby. We caught our maintenance guy spooning with our 130-pound mastiff on the floor. We encourage their love as best we can now. Once, at the very last moment when no other babysitter was available, I hired one that was sort of notorious for not being good. Not dangerous or anything, like leaving the child unattended, but like the type where she would not console the child if they were crying or punish them for doing small things. By the way, I was very suspicious, so I was continuously glancing at the baby cam. The babysitter was playing with him, singing songs, and completely engaging him well beyond the way you would expect somebody who was considered a bad babysitter to act. Essentially, what happened was the babysitter got hired by a crazy parent who didn't like her at all, so they spread a bunch of mumbo-jumbo through the neighborhood. When I came home, I gave her a very large tip, and she was the one I always hired whenever I needed a babysitter. I've been a pretty regular weekend nanny for an amazing family for 4 years now. They cycle through a different couple weekday nannies since I've been with them. There is only one monitor, and it's in the little dude's room. Once the mom showed me on the camera why they let one go. Little dude said, "Mommy said I don't have to do that." And the nanny snapped back, "Well, it doesn't matter. Mommy's a dog." And then dragged the kid out of the room by his shirt. Super fired. Not a nanny cam because this happened in the 90s, and I don't think we had them in Scotland then. But my mom came home early one day because she had become suspicious of our nanny as my sister and I never slept after a day with her. She found both my sister and I in bed in the middle of the day. Turned out my nanny had been dosing us up with child medicine to make us sleep all day so she could sit and do nothing. My mom put a nanny cam in my sister's bedroom. The only disturbing thing my mom allegedly saw was the babysitter crying while holding my sister. Turns out, the babysitter just had a miscarriage the day before. Well, a case which happened near where I live. Woman used to work, husband out of country. Had a 2-year-old kid. They hired a nanny to look after him during daytime. Day by day, kids started looking malnourished. So she set up a spy cam. Apparently, the lady used to bring her kid and feed him all the food left for the kid she was supposed to babysit. Then she would feed the kid cheap biscuits. She was promptly handed over to police. My story isn't that interesting, but I have a camera to check in on my rabbit when I'm not there. The biggest surprises were mostly just how almost nobody followed my pet sitting instructions. The one exception, ironically, was my brother who claimed to hate the rabbit and always wanted to get rid of it. I got an alert one day that my camera had detected movement while my bro was there taking care of him, and I decided to take a peek. I opened the app connected to the camera and saw my bro walk into my room, lay on my floor, and start playing with my rabbit. It just warmed my heart. We have cameras outside of our house. One day my neighbor told me that he saw my bunnies roaming the streets a few times. I didn't believe him, so I took a look. One time at work, I looked at the cameras and saw the gate slightly open, so I rewound the footage. I go to work super early, so I watched as my wife fed them, then got ready for work. The bunnies peeked around the side of the house and waited to see my wife's car leave, then they pushed on the gate hard enough for the latch to set free, then they left one by one. Later, before I got back home from work, they would make their way back and close the freaking gate. Smart little suckers. I never knew the gate latch was so weak, so I fixed that problem. A friend caught his nanny hitting their kid for interrupting that day's binge of the TV show Friends. I travel the US for work, and am fortunate enough to be able to bring my 2 beagles with me. They have never been away from my side longer than the time I've been at work. They are 10 and 13. I have a camera that I use to check in on them sometimes, mostly because my larger beagle is quite the ingenious guy. Opening doors, scooting chairs over places so he can jump up onto the counters, etc., etc. Last year I was in Oregon and had to go home to Michigan for an emergency. I do not fly with them, I will only drive. So I was in a pickle and reluctantly hired someone off of Rover that was willing to come stay over at my hotel room for 3 days. She was great, kept up on texting me about the dogs, said things like tossing them a ball right now, so I would check in via the cam when I thought it was appropriate. This woman was amazing. Not only was she playing with them enough to make them exhausted, she was even teaching them new tricks, making them use their brains to solve puzzles, and even got my 42-pound beagle to get up on her back so she could do push-ups. She was an avid CrossFitter. I was extremely happy. A little late to the party, but here goes. My mom suspected our maid of stealing the silverware, and she's just freaking nosy. Anyway, the maid was indeed stealing the silverware. I think that ended up being overshadowed by my dad screwing her though. Not me, but my aunt's friend set up a nanny cam because she noticed that every time she changed her child's diaper, the child would start crying a lot more than usual. Turns out when they watched the nanny change her diaper, she would use Clorox wipes if they were nearby instead of grabbing the baby wipes. For anyone wondering what happened afterward, they fired the nanny immediately and the father became a stay-at-home dad. We have a security camera in my bedroom for my free roam bunny so we can keep an eye on her whilst we work, if we go on holiday, etc. Well, my dad is 50 and is a big bloke who acts like he doesn't like pets, came over to visit one day whilst I was out. He went in my room and crouched down calling the bunny. He spent an hour trying to pet the rabbit and kept repeating in a soft voice, "I'm not gonna hurt you. I just want to pet you and see how fluffy you are." He just about crapped himself when I spoke through the security camera to tell him she's very fluffy. My family bought one to see our dogs when we leave on vacation twice a year. It's one where they can hear us and we thought it'd be great. We hardly used it. We also asked our maid to dog sit for us while we were out. Once when we looked at the feed, we saw the dog sitter there a solid 30 minutes early just petting the dogs and playing with them. She's since retired from working, but she was the sweetest old lady and we love her. Another time, my dad left a wad of cash on top of the washing machine, about $600, and she put a rubber band around it with a note saying he misplaced it. I was a nanny for a family for over 10 years. I moved 8 hours away, but sometimes I drive up to stay with them if they need me for a weekend. I miss the kids so much. I also babysat and house cleaned all through high school and college. I pride myself on never stealing a thing and never having laid a hand on a child. I'd rather maintain a great relationship and have guaranteed client base for years to come instead of a $20 object to pawn. Most they'd see me do on a nanny cam was picking my nose. This is a bit of a tangent, but has anybody ever seen the show Nanny 911? I remember when that show used to come on a few years ago, and it just blew my mind how irresponsible some of these parents were. And that's not even including how crazy the kids would get sometimes. We once caught the nanny putting charcoal to feed them as a snack. This woman claimed that she thought it was a snack. It was in a charcoal box. My brothers were 4. Chasing my cats around with a broom, hitting them. She's since been fired. From a cannon, I hope. My grandpa was staying with my parents, but they figured it best to hire the regular sitter to watch my younger siblings overnight since they didn't think my grandpa was up to the task, and they were attending a wedding a couple hours away and made plans to spend the night in a hotel nearby. They had set up a nanny cam in a couple rooms, my siblings' bedroom, the master bedroom, living room, and kitchen, all motion activated. They normally wouldn't bother looking through the footage if everything seemed fine upon returning home and their master bedroom cam had never been triggered before. When they returned, they noticed that the cam in the master bedroom had been triggered, so they decided to take a look, cut to footage of my grandpa and the sitter both naked, aggressively making out from the entrance of the room, staggering while intertwined towards the bed, and then about 20 minutes of banging on my parents' bed. The sitter was about 20 years old and my grandpa was around 70 at the time. My dad called me immediately after he saw the footage, laughing his butt off, and I could hear my mom crying in the background, completely mortified from what she had just witnessed, and shouting at my dad to throw out the sheets and kick out grandpa. My mom called the sitter to confront her and she just apologized and said there was connection or some crap to that matter. When she asked my grandpa what he was thinking, he just said, "At my age, you must seize every opportunity." I wish there was audio for the build-up. I lay awake at night sometimes, just wondering what kind of game my grandpa was talking to get in that sitter's pants. I was the kiddo. My mom often tells the story of how she watched me give a big ol' hug to my babysitter who just broke down out of nowhere after serving me lunch. Turns out her dad had died a month back and it just wasn't a good day for her. I still remember you, Miss Yancey. I hope you're doing just fine now. The couple I sat for had a nanny cam in their living room, the kind that went in teddy bears. They got me on video giving their 2-year-old the Heimlich after he tried to eat a rock. We have a nanny cam, and we caught our nanny dancing with our baby, making him laugh and giving him kisses. She's the best, and the cameras give us the peace of mind to know she really treats him like her own. I pay my neighbor to feed the stray cats in my garden when I'm away for days at a time, and the camera caught my neighbor trying to come in by pole vaulting one time. He nailed it amazingly. I got a nanny cam to keep an eye out for my elderly grandfather, especially when the home aides were there. My grandfather started asking for lots of cash and couldn't remember what was happening to it. A brooch that my aunt was supposed to get disappeared, and then I heard reports of my grandfather being inappropriate with some of the home health aides. He was busted, squirreling away his medication that he was supposed to be taking in his chair, giving money to an aide, and inappropriately harassing another aide. We didn't have a nanny cam, but my mom set up the camcorder when she suspected her babysitter was stealing, and then caught the babysitter stealing. She returned most of the stuff when my mom threatened to report her to the police. I think she should still have reported her anyway. Now she probably just went on stealing at other people's places. The family I nanny for told me that their previous nanny got caught doing loads of awful things. The couple that outraged me most were 1, leaving their 3-year-old daughter in the tub with water up to her chest for 2 hours every day while she sat in another room unable to see said child. And 2, once she went to run an errand with the same kid, and their doorbell camera caught her putting the kid in the car seat, not buckling her, and peeling off. The mom said you could see the toddler trying to buckle herself in before they took off. Edit. Number 1. The camera was not in the bathroom. It was where they were able to see where the nanny was, room near bathroom, and their kid if the door was left open, which it always was while she was bathing. Number 2. They thought she was a perfectly good nanny until their kid was saying weird things that were going on, and they decided to watch the footage. They fired her after seeing what she was doing, and that's where I, Super Nanny, came in. The cameras weren't actually for the nanny. They were for the kid's therapist because she was prone to violent behavior and they were trying to fix it. My aunt has a nanny cam and found my older cousin's babysitter playing blackjack with him. She lost $50. I've caught her making pillow forts that are heavily resistant to the monsters that may or may not come out during heavy thunderstorms with my kiddo, 20 minutes after bedtime. Needless to say, she was dealt with appropriately. I'm not a parent, rather the child, and I had this nanny, or Yaya as we would call it. It became useless because she soon found out and kept unplugging the camera. It turns out she was slowly stealing money from the family. We fired her. I was the child, and there weren't any nanny cams, but my parents had left a small bucket of toys and things to keep me busy, and they hired a babysitter to watch me while they both had to take overtime at work and knew they would be gone most of the day. The babysitter moved that bucket of toys to another room, put me in a crib, and proceeded to go off and read or something and left me there for hours with nothing to do, only coming back to check on me or feed me. My parents came back to me just sadly sitting in my crib. Indoor cameras hooked up to the same unit as the outdoor cams. Husband was walking to his study, saw a giant huntsman spider, Australian here, and screamed like a little girl and jumped away. Needless to say, I bolted to the computer to watch the playback on repeat for a few minutes. I laughed so hard I had an asthma attack. She stole a single puzzle piece of what we were trying to solve. Saw her put it in her pocket. Final straw was one of our freaking potted plants. Who goes out of their way to steal a potted plant? Hello? I'm glad I stopped babysitting before cameras became a thing. A couple I sat for had adorable kids, but the dad had one room in the house devoted to a full model railroad setup. Dozens of trains, bridges, teeny villages, the works. After they went to bed, and during that long, boring stretch before the parents came home, I just played with the train set. Only regret is that I couldn't toot the horns because the kids would have busted me. Not a parent and not a nanny cam, then why are you commenting on this post? But my uncle once set up a wildlife camera, the ones that hunters use, to get a photo of something happened in my great-grandmother's apartment. She was very demented, so she told us incoherent stories about how there were people there stealing all of her liquor and chocolates. Turns out, she was the one who stole the goodies, but we also found out her other son, my other uncle who no one has contact with due to his shady actions with his wife, had a key to the apartment and was regularly visiting at midnight to steal some jewelry. Friends of ours don't have kids, but have dogs. They were going out of town and told the dog sitter about all the cameras, including the one that is outside, but sometimes picks up reflections and will actively notify them of motion. The dog sitter seemed to get it, but she forgot to convey that to her boyfriend, who came out and walked around naked quite a bit. I was the one caught in the camera a few times. Number 1. A family who had bunnies caught me on camera booping noses to the beat of the song I was singing. Little bunny foo-foo hopping around the kitchen, picking up all the lettuce and munchy munch munch. Number 2. A different family saw me get freaking tackled by their 95-pound Mastiff puppy, and they immediately called me to make sure I didn't have a concussion since I just kind of laid there for a while. I was fine. I just got the wind knocked out of me. Number 3. Yet another different family saw me reading a book to their kids and later complimented all the voices I make. I had no idea they could hear audio and I got so embarrassed since I really did go all out. When I was around 12 years old, my parents caught my babysitter on camera stealing my NES games and shoving them into her pants and shirt. They confronted her about it and she kept denying it until Ninja Gaiden fell out of her pant leg. My mom took her into a room and made her take out all the games she stole. She literally had games shoved under the strap of her bra on her back so that she could sneak them out of the house, and others were put inside the waistband of her underwear. She must have really thought about this for a while. Anyway, we got the games back and she was sent home without pay. I dog sit for some neighbors, one of which told me she has a camera in the living room/dining room for her dogs. You know those ones that dispense treats? Anyways, I thought it was a strange essential oil diffuser until she told me what it was. I was being paid to play with them for an hour, but she found out that I was actually staying for 2 or 3 hours. When she asked me about it, I think I said something like, I'd want someone to do the same for my dog. Ever since then, she leaves me treats in the kitchen and even got me a Christmas present from the dogs. She picked up our pug Doogie and was dancing around the living room with him while that Carly Rae Jepsen song was playing. My uncle told me this once when a babysitter was holding his daughter, my older cousin, when she was a baby. The baby was playing with the toys, and she somehow swallowed a small piece of something, and the babysitter performed the Heimlich but for babies. She saved my cousin, and her family was thankful. They have no idea where the babysitter is now, but right now she's supposed to be around her late 40s. Edit. I asked my uncle about this, and apparently they know where the babysitter is. She's in California, and she is a very well-paid doctor and makes over $310,000 a year as a physician. That's the only thing he knows since she left. Not a nanny cam, but the baby monitor managed to catch our then 1.5-month-old projectile vomiting on me, and then straight up into the mouth and on the face of my husband 2 minutes later. When she put my daughter down for a nap, she took a nap on the bed next to her. This is just so cute. Caught the babysitter rubbing one out on our couch. The babysitter was/still is my female cousin. I figured the best thing was to just say nothing, save the awkwardness. She did it a fair amount. I then mentioned our house cam by accident some months later and her face dropped. I realized what I'd said, then casually threw in that I never checked it, again, to save the awkwardness. A colleague of mine saw that when his 8-month-old baby cried, the nanny just ignored him and kept watching reality TV, not paying any attention to him while he bawled his eyes out. She did not attempt to console him or anything. She just tried to hear the TV. There were a few other troubling instances too, like she'd say they went on a brief stroll but disappeared for hours with no explanation, or she didn't follow the parents' instructions on how to put him to sleep and let him cry, and my colleague realized that the baby was anxious and desperate every time the nanny arrived. Heartbreaking, really. Not a nanny cam, but a vid. My sister-in-law sat the camera down thinking she turned it off. I have over an hour of her teasing my toddler in a mean way with candy and popsicles. She started telling him that he would get some, then hold it just out of reach. She then ate it in front of him, making sounds. She was also calling him mean and weird names like Turd Muncher and Ricky Stupido. The camera got all the audio, but only some video. At the end of the video is when we got home. When I confronted her with the video, she started claiming I doctored it, that I was a liar, a jerkwad, and hated her because she was prettier than my wife. She is not. That was the last time she was allowed around either of our kids unsupervised. She was the sister-in-law for 10-ish years and is now the crazy Karen ex-sister-in-law. I can't have her presence on social media because she attacks me all the time and says lies. I'm also estranged from my brother because of her. 10 years of her warped his perception of our family. He still thinks some of the whacked-out things she accused our dad, sister, other brother, and various other family members of were true. No reasoning has convinced him of the truth, not even the thought that if video evidence refutes some of the claims, then all can be considered suspect. I may get comments and advice of what I could do, but in the end, you can't fight crazy, and sometimes life is just not fair. The only thing I have done to make things better is ignore her. She eventually just starts attacking someone else, like an annoying yipping dog that just needs to annoy. As for my brother, I hope time will help to fix things. I also think that he might just be more like her than I think. Birds of a feather fly together. Oh man, this next one is actually so wrong and so messed up. Sitting on our couch playing with the dogs like we paid them to. I have a nanny cam for the purpose of creeping my dog while I'm at work, but it's how I discovered my former superintendent was coming into my apartment randomly to steal a nug from my jar of red eye. Friend caught hers rummaging through her closet and stealing a blouse. She confronted her about it when she returned home, and the woman played innocent. She was wearing the freaking blouse. Remember that post from before, you can't fight crazy? Yeah, I think that applies here. We hired a dog sitter over the Thanksgiving holidays to check on the pooch, feed the cats, get the mail, etc. Edit, definitely pointed out the various security cams to her. She asked if she could bring her sister along for company. We said sure, no problem. The sister, we found out in conversation, attends a nearby hyper-conservative fundamentalist school. When the hired sitter took the dog out and the fundy sister had the house to herself, she took the opportunity to scream, "Frick!" at the top of her lungs a few times. Not a lot else. Just paced around the living room dropping high-decibel F-bombs. Gotta find some way to vent that fundy angst. Watched her outside playing with my dogs. She was dog-sitting. Our yellow Labrador and golden retriever puppies started munching the blueberries right off our blueberry bushes. They know dang well they're not supposed to get into the blueberry patch. We watched our dog sitter run over to them to try to get them to stop. She then ran outside and ran back out with the bowl. She proceeded to race the dogs for the blueberries. Had to be one of the highlights of our trip. We came home to a bowl of blueberries in the fridge and 2 very guilty puppers. My friend is a nanny, and sometimes she takes the small human she watches and has her dance for the parents randomly in front of the camera or wave since it is a Google Hub and has photos of the parents. Small gifts for the parents to find if they review the video from that day. Not my kids, but my sister's. This was when my nephew was still very young and my sister was still breastfeeding. Long story short, my sister caught the babysitter drinking her breast milk. She had her suspicions because my nephew would go through twice as much milk when the babysitter was taking care of him. My sister set up the camera and caught the guy in the act. Apparently the guy was some sort of fitness nut and had read that breast milk could be very beneficial. As weird as it sounds, my sister ended up working out a deal with the guy. She got him to drop the price of watching the kid in exchange for a bit of breast milk every now and again. I have cameras all over the inside and outside of my house. It came standard with the Ring doorbell. Next came critter cams I put near my bird feeders, then cameras everywhere. I used them mostly to look for the wild bunnies in my yard and to see the owl leave its roost at night. The indoor cameras are dog cameras. My wife and I use them to view and talk to our dogs while at work. The weirdest thing I've caught my dog doing? I made a batch of jerky, put it in a large Ziploc bag, and placed it in the dining room table in preparation for a camping trip. My 19-pound Shih Tzu, which is large for a Tzu, was caught on video moving a dining room chair, jumping up onto it, then jumping onto the table. He ate the entire bag of jerky, leaving only the bag. He did this in less than 10 minutes. My babysitter took the kids out of the house and claimed she went to the park. Turns out she took them to a friend's house without car seats. I'm a nanny, and it is in my contract that all cameras must be disclosed. Any undisclosed camera I find will immediately void the contract. That being said, if I get thrown up on, pooped on, painted on, food on, whatever on me, I need to know what is a safe area to change so that my bosses don't get a show they aren't paying for. People opposed to this are not people I work for. One of my exes and her mom had to leave town for a week and they had 3 cats. One only had 3 legs because he got hit by a car, poor timid little thing that hid all the time and refused to come out, and a dog that had diabetes. They hired someone just to come over once in the morning and once at night to feed, let the dog out and give the dog his medicine. They had cams, I'm not sure why they put them in place, and found that the guy stayed there all day just playing with the animals and even got the timid cat to come out and cuddle with him. They showed me the videos of him arriving and all of their pets rushing to the door to meet him. I house/dog sit for friends of my parents. The first time I did it, they mentioned they had a security camera by the front door that was motion activated, and I didn't really think anything of it. They were gone for a few weeks, they come home, their 2 giant huskies are happy, I get paid, and all was well. A couple weeks later, my mom calls me laughing and laughing. My parents had dinner with the friends I dog sit for, and they showed a video to my parents from the front door cam. Apparently, all it showed was me sprinting full speed down the hallway, a dog toy in hand, biggest stupid grin on my face, followed by the 2 huskies running and sliding after me, followed by me, followed by the huskies, over and over and over and over again. I sit for them as often as I can. Not a nanny cam, but a camera in my sister's room when she was a toddler. She had a habit of getting out of her toddler bed, so me, my dad, and my mom would watch it, and every time she got up, we'd all say, "Go back to bed, Serena." It was funny to see her reaction. I was the babysitter. I used to look after the daughter of a couple who played tennis with my uncle. They were super rich and went out all the time. The kid would go to bed at about 7, then I would sneak a bit of booze from their well-stocked bar. I wouldn't drink it on the job, but I'd pour it into my water bottle to take to my next party. It happened on and off for about 3 years. Then one night, they must have changed their security system or something, and I got busted. They were very chill about it, seeing as I clearly didn't drink it while watching their kid, but told me they could get in trouble for supplying.
Teachers, what was the best excuse for being late that turned out to be true? Storytime. I was the only high schooler on our bus one winter. The other detail important to this story is that we had the oldest model bus that wasn't in the best mechanical shape. It had one of those mechanically operated doors, it would shoot out a plume of black smoke every time it started, and just looked much less fancy than all the other buses the school had. Anyway, one winter it was so cold that the diesel engine stopped working. The bus driver said the cold made the diesel in the lines gel up. I have no idea if that's accurate, but either way the bus wouldn't start. Fortunately, we were only 5 miles from the school and all the kids had been picked up already, so they just radioed another newer bus to loop back around and pick us up. The bus driver radioed the elementary school but completely forgot to let the high school know. So I show up to class and the teacher asks why I was late. I said, the cold caused the fuel lines to gel up in the school bus, repeating exactly what the bus driver told us. But I was the only high schooler on that bus, so no other students were there to back up my story. The teacher didn't believe me, and instead of just calling the main office to verify the story, she mocked me in front of the whole class saying, "It's not possible for fuel to freeze in the cold," and everyone in the class agreed with her, saying that I was a bad liar and laughed at how dumb my story was. Ultimately, the office did let her know about the bus after she tried giving me a detention, but the embarrassment is still there and she never gave me an apology. I don't really blame a lot of teachers for being skeptical about excuses kids make for being late and stuff, but the fact that they didn't even bother to check if there was a situation with the bus is really unreasonable. Also, yeah, apparently fuel lines can start to freeze up and everything, or the fuel inside the lines can freeze up if it's about minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit. I was the kid. Physics, 11th grade. The day prior to this day, my neighbor passed away and her son was a friend of mine and also in this class. Terribly long story, but it was a self-deletion by hanging, and I was the one who found her. I had nightmares all night and skipped the first half of school the next day. When my physics teacher saw me later, she asked me where I was that morning. Before I could explain, she said, "That friend was looking for you and concerned. He seemed more worried than he should have been and was a little upset about you not being there. The guy's mom died, but he still went to class and didn't tell anyone, but was worried about me. I couldn't tell her what had happened at that point, so I just said I overslept." Well, first of all, that's traumatizing. Second of all, it's nice that he didn't say anything when his friend obviously didn't want to say anything quite yet. And third of all, there aren't many of these from the perspective of actual teachers that I could find, so I expect a lot of I was the kid in these. Obligatory not a teacher, but I am an admin in a music school. I had a mom frantically call me and let me know her daughter would probably be late or miss their guitar lesson in a couple hours because she couldn't find the kid. I was just kind of okay, well, I will let her teacher know. Got another call about an hour later from the same mom. She found her kid, but apparently the daughter went to a friend's house and decided to dye her hair green? They lived pretty close by, so I did let them know they could still come in for their lesson. Mom said she would call me back and let me know in a minute or two. Never called back. Her daughter showed up for her lesson about 5 minutes late with this bright green coiffure. I gotta admit it looked rad as heck, but also kind of a confusing thing to be an audience to the build-up. I don't know about the rest of you, maybe it's just me, but I'm kind of over the whole unnaturally dyed hair look. It's cool, I don't mind it, but I know so many people still who are like, "Oh my god, blue hair, oh!" And I'm like, dude, are you is it 2010 still? Are you still in love with Ramona Flowers from Scott Pilgrim? One of my friends was training for cross-country on a weekend once and she was hit by a pickup truck that ran a stop sign. She flew over the top of it and broke both her kneecaps. The pickup truck drove off. She said she can't remember any of the events that happened immediately afterwards, but the police report said that a bystander pulled over to help, and when they asked if she was alright, she just kept repeating a bunch of letters and numbers over and over, not even saying anything else except JHP 887, JHP 887, JHP 887, JHP 887. Just constantly saying it like she was in some manic state. Eventually, after the police had already been called, the dude who pulled over to help realized that those were the license plate numbers and wrote them down. There was no security footage of it, and her being able to glance at the plates was the only reason they were able to track down the truck that hit her. To this day, that is the single most awesome thing that she's ever done. I can't imagine flying over the top of a truck and having enough mental capacity in that moment to look at the license plate and memorize it while having two knees that don't have functioning kneecaps. I wish there was a silver lining to this story, but she had to have tons of surgery and to this day has some bad knees and can't really run like she used to. Not to mention the guy they tracked down didn't have any insurance and was just an elderly man who had pretty severe dementia and panicked after hitting her, so they didn't even press charges. Because of the way that they told this one, it doesn't really seem to fit in this topic. I have to commend the woman, first of all, for being able to memorize the license plate through the shock and the pain that they were probably enduring in the moment. And I guess they missed the cross-country race in the end, I assume, so I guess it counts. I apologize that I'm writing this on mobile, so there might be errors. I'm an English professor, and one year a pretty good student showed up without one of his 2 major term papers. He explained that his safe had been stolen by a contractor who was working on their house. His laptop was in the safe, and that's where his paper was. I genuinely believe him because he is being a really good student. Then, over the next few weeks, he started to show up to class looking very tired. He said that he was on a hunt for the person who stole his safe, and he was spending late nights with his cousin driving around looking for the guy because they knew his van. Now the student and his cousin were both recently back from tours in Iraq and had seen combat experience. They wanted to find the guy to beat the tar out of him and get the safe back because his wife's wedding ring was in the safe as well as a bunch of cash. He rewrote the paper and turned it in apologetically that it wasn't up to his usual quality. But he still kept coming to class looking like he hadn't slept. After a little while, he came in very happy to my office and he reported that he found the guy after a long search that involved breaking into a drug den, shaking people down with baseball bats, and even bribing some prostitutes. He said that they found the guy's van at a Taco Bell after getting a tip from a prostitute, and they cornered him and waited for the police to come. I read in the news that he had in fact done a citizen's arrest and stopped the guy at a Taco Bell, and that they ended up calling in the Secret Service because he used the cash that he stole from the safe to buy a bunch of counterfeiting equipment. Secret Service apparently investigate counterfeiting, so the whole investigation happened because this guy, who I dubbed the White Shaft, tracked the scumbag down through the bad side of town late at night to get a wedding ring, some cash, and his research paper back. It all turned out to be true. He got the ring and the laptop back. I gladly accepted his original paper, and it got a much higher grade than the rewrite. A couple people asked for more details, so here are a few more. I can't recall the year this happened, but it was the height of the war with the US and Iraq. My student had enrolled in the army right after 9/11 on the same day as his cousin. They were both just out of high school and enrolled due to patriotism and frustration. According to him, when he started his vigilante spree, he actually went inside of a house used by a drug addict to try and find the guy. They shook the house down with baseball bats and forced everyone out into the street. When the cops showed up, they told my students how dangerous this was and not to do it again. They then gave him their card and said, "But call us if you do." They shook down at least 2 other drug dens, and the same cop was waiting outside both times to arrest people, since he didn't need to get a search warrant as everyone was outside now at the point of 2 baseball bats. I told my student about how dangerous this all was, and he was very John Wick about getting his wife's wedding ring back. Also, I tried to find a link to the story, but it was a small story and the Googles aren't being very helpful, especially since I can't remember the year. What a nerd, going through all that trouble to get a good grade. No, I'm joking, obviously. That story is awesome, and if there was a link they could have supplied to an article, I would have been so happy. Not a teacher, but my senior year of high school, they were doing construction on the building, and so part of it was completely closed. To make up for the lack of space, there was a vocational school nearby in the district that let us use the extra rooms they did not use. To get to the other school, you could get on a bus, or if your last class of the day was at the vocational school, you could drive over there. I was driving a friend and myself over to the same English class. Traffic gets pretty stop and go at this this time as there's a lot of buses and students all going to the same place. The kid behind me wasn't paying attention during one of the stop moments and rear-ended me. Now it was stop-and-go traffic, so it wasn't like any of us were going fast. It was really just a bump. Still, everyone got out to see the damage and make sure everyone was okay. We were all fine. We both had piece of crap cars. We both decided that nothing was significant. May as well get back into the line of traffic and get to class. The kid who hit me was also in the same English class. My friend and I walked into class late. The teacher was known for being a stickler. Very snidely says, "You two better have a good reason for being tardy." My friend laughs and I respond, "Yeah, other classmate just rear-ended us on the way here. You can confirm with him when he gets here." So a minute later he rushes in saying, "Sorry I'm tardy, I hit CM Hooley and friend." Rest of class laughs, stern teacher makes us all get down to business, the end.
I always say you should treat teachers right, but it's undeniable that either some teachers are waiting for you to slip up or actively want to get you in trouble. I mean, I once had a teacher that said to me after I questioned her teaching method, "I'm going to make your life a living hell," took me outside away from the class and said that to my face. I had a student play our NCAA Top 25 football team be late to a college midterm. As a note, we are in a metropolitan area. Emails me and goes, "I fully understand you think this is going to be a lie, but I found the guy unconscious in his car. Had to stop and call 911. Be there soon." This was one where it was so wild I couldn't fathom it being fake on some level. I was sitting there proctoring and thinking how I was going to have to request a police report to verify. But the kicker is the guy made it to class and finished the exam on time, and got an A from what I recall.
Good Lord, he a football player, got a little big smart brain in that head of his, and he's a moral person. My God, he sounds like the whole package. TLDR, student shows up to class with a head injury with a note to prove it. Chooses not to go home because he doesn't want to miss the activity for that day. I teach a college freshman paper writing class. Over the course of the semester, we have 2 workshop sessions where students bring in their drafts and critique each other's draft papers. Each one counts for 5% of the grade, and missing it unexcused means forfeiting that 5%. An excused absence makes the other workshop session worth 10% of the grade. Anyway, during the first workshop session, there was a student who I did not expect to be absent at all, but 60 minutes into the class had shown up. Class is 90 minutes long. Normally, I wouldn't allow someone to come in that late, especially to a workshop session. However, he had the best excuse. He gives me this letter from a doctor at the PE department. Turns out that he had judo for PE that morning. He was paired up with a more experienced sparring partner who flipped him upside down. He landed on his head, I think. On the symptoms, the note read that he had temporary memory loss and a possible concussion. Under recommendations, it said that he should go home. I asked him why he didn't go home. He said that he didn't want to deal with the complications of missing workshop. I should note that my class was on the 5th floor of a building with no elevators and high ceilings, so he had already gone up 4 flights of stairs. I didn't want to waste his efforts, so I let him push through. He mentioned that he couldn't remember where he put his pen, needed to write comments on classmates' drafts, so I begged to one of his poor classmates to lend him one. Afterwards, I went to our faculty room and told them about it. They all called BS, and I showed them the note, which completely changed their tone. They all started accusing me of creating a pressuring classroom environment. Half joking, I think. Just want to clarify the timeline because I realize it might have caused some concern. The judo incident happened in the morning around 9 or 10 a.m. My class was from 4 to 5:30, with the student arriving 5-ish. In the time between the incident and the student arriving late to my class, he was able to rest, regained his memories, although possibly not totally since again he couldn't find his pen, was cleared from having a concussion by a doctor. The doctor wrote the note to explain why he would miss classes because the recommendation was that he go straight home, which would mean taking public transport for about an hour. He was still wearing the judo pants and he still did a good job critiquing his classmates' work, by the way. I once judo through a dude, he poured milkshake all over my friend, called me a homophobic slur, and tried to punch me in the face, and I totally emasculated him in front of his girlfriend. That was in early high school, 2007, 2008.
Not a teacher, but when I was in elementary school, I remember an incident where I had a homework sheet I'd taken home to complete. I can't remember what the subject was. I do remember I spent most of my evening after dinner sitting at the table with my dad trying to complete it. This was torture. For some reason, my dad and I never connected in a learning environment. He would dictate things to me and expect me to get it, but he really struggled to walk me through the process needed for me to understand it. So after many hours of yelling and arguing and tears and being absolutely miserable, I finished the damn worksheet, set it down and went to bed. In the morning, I woke up to discover a critical error with my homework. When I set it down to get ready for bed, I had set it on top of the bird cage instead of on top of the shelf next to it. I don't know why I thought to do this instead of putting it on the shelf. I can only assume I thought flat surface good in my poor tired brain. My cockatiel was greatly offended by this mysterious new object on top of its home and had spent most of the night shredding my worksheet to pieces. I took the remains with me to school, and when they asked us to hand in the assignments, I kinda just looked at my teacher with a completely defeated expression on my face and uttered the words, my bird ate my homework. The uproar of laughter from the class was defeating. My teacher took the sheet from me and examined it carefully, then sighed as he tells me, well, it looks like you tore this page apart with a hole punch. Come see me after class. I didn't expect to be accused of lying, so in my shock, I started arguing with him. No, really, my bird ate my homework, which only spurred the laughter from the class further. I didn't know what else to do. Did you ever get that frog in your throat feeling as a kid, where your voice just seizes up and you can't manage to squeeze out any sound no matter how you might try? For years afterwards, I'd get bullies making stupid "did your bird eat your homework again" jokes from kids that had been in that class. Adult me thinks it's kind of funny. I have pushed myself, been pushed by my dad so hard just to complete that damn assignment, only to have it ruined, be accused of lying, and be embarrassed and teased for the situation. Poor 7-year-old Lanko just wasn't prepared for life yet, you know?
While I've never had a pet eat my homework, I have had my brother drink a liquid science assignment that I had in primary school, but I don't believe I was ever accused of lying about him drinking it, so that kind of turned out well for me.
Monday, my astronomy professor walked in unusually late. He was out of breath and apologized and said, I swear I'm late for a good reason, and went on to inform us about Betelgeuse, a star that has been dimming more than usual and has been debated between astronomers as to what this dimming business is all about. Some are saying maybe that's just what it does, and others are saying maybe it could go supernova. Well then, he says in what felt like a single breath, so I read an article that came out today, and some researchers suggested that Betelgeuse could be spewing out enough matter to make clouds that are interfering with how much light makes it to us. But they hadn't looked at the observatory data that corresponds to that phenomenon. So I looked over the data and found out that they were wrong, and it can't be a cloud that's causing the dimming. So I was writing to them to tell them their hypothesis was incorrect and to show them the math and data that reaches that conclusion. And he had this smile on his face like he was so proud of himself. Ended it with, so now y'all are the first to know that it is definitely not a cloud.
I don't know about the rest of y'all, and maybe this is just my personal experience, my personal opinion, but science teachers are the most passionate about their work, I find, and in turn, that makes them the cutest, in my opinion.
I teach at a community college on the Texas coast. We reopened as soon as possible after Harvey, and the excuses were insane. Someone stole our door/air conditioner/tires, and we're waiting on the police. That could take a while. Travel was hazardous in some areas. Our hot water heater exploded and the shower completely melted. We just got back into our house and it's full of snakes and seagulls. My grandmother is missing. Some teachers complained and adopted stricter attendance policies, but several of my students were homeless or living without electricity or running water and still taking time to stay in communication. So I ditched my attendance policy entirely and basically said, I'm going to be here regardless. If you can be here, great. If not, let me know you're okay as soon as you can, and I'll count you present and tell you what we went over in class. I'm proud to say
say that almost all my students finished the semester and most did very well in their exams. I teach psychology and I start the semester with writing assignment on stress. It gives me insight into the lives of my students, so I'm not often completely floored by odd excuses.
Sounds like a pretty rad, understanding individual.
Not a teacher, but I hear a lot of tardy excuses. My work is pretty flexible with schedules. We let people write their own work hours with start times. You can change your schedule on a whim so long as you put in 80 hours during the pay period, 2 weeks. So I, being the supervisor, had to have them check in with me when they arrived. It was so stupid. My guys have always been honest about when they were late and made up the time without question. Still, we had a couple months of them checking in on arrival. Even if someone was 1 minute late, I was required to document the reason and provide a course of action. I said screw that and put up a board for people to write in their times, excuse, and when they plan on making up the time. The excuse field was always there, so people would write in something every day. Coffee was still good to waste. Recovering from taco last night. Couldn't find clean underwear. Saw a cute redhead on the bus and decided to watch where she got off. Nothing ever came of it and rules were lifted after a few months at my request.
Sounds like a pretty chill, reasonable dude. I wouldn't mind them being my supervisor, although I would definitely recommend you check into that guy who was looking where the redhead got off, cause that sounds semi to most definitely kinda sorta stalker-ish.
How do you subtly duck with people? When my dad was a mechanic, people would come in and describe a noise their car is making. It's kind of going screech. My dad would close his eyes and make them repeat the noise over and over while listening intently, saying, "Keep it up. I think I almost got it." Until they're basically out of breath from all this weird-sounding gibberish coming out of their mouths. Imagine other professions trying to do this. "My God, what's wrong with the engine? We have to get this plane off the ground." "Well, it kind of..." Yeah, spit it out." "Well, it kind of sort of goes like..." I don't know what's going on." Sir, listen. "Yeah?" "You're an idiot." I used to have CCTV monitors in my office at a pretty large store, so I would call different departments and hang up right before they picked up the phone, and call them back as soon as they turned around. After a few tries, they would stand and wait for the phone to ring again, but I'd wait until the exact second they turned around. Nobody ever found out who it was. Easily the best entertainment ever. When someone sneezes, I tell them to shut up, and they almost always reply, "Thank you," because they are so used to other people saying, "Bless you." Hi, narrator here. I know it's so short, but it's just the idea. This is so funny. Just, shut up. Thank you. Or I wonder what if it got even like more aggressive, just like, achoo! Shut up! Thank you. I work in pathology, and I spend most of my day dictating into a microphone. I keep myself entertained by messing with the ladies in transcription in a myriad of ways. One thing I like to do is pick a random word and slightly mispronounce it all day just to mess with their heads. One time, we received a tube of chapstick, a small tube of toothpaste, and a bottle of skin lotion that the ER had taken out of someone's backside, not sure if they were a little freaky or just mentally ill. After I dictated that case and described the items, I went to the gift shop and bought the same items and then left them on their desk with a note that said, "No need for these to go to waste." They were confused, but had used the hand lotion. By the time they listened to the dictation, I could hear them shout from down the hall. Also, since I recite a lot of case numbers, anytime a number happens to have 666 in it, I will immediately say, "Mark of the Beast!" and use my phone to play an evil laugh and sounds from hell. On Halloween, I taught myself how to say a couple of sentences backward and then recorded it and played it backwards into the microphone. That one freaked them out a bit. If there is ever a really good joke on Reddit jokes, I will end my dictation for the day by telling the joke to them. I also like to do prank calls. I'm the peanut butter jelly guy. When I'm on a waiting list at a restaurant, I always put the name down as Parpar. About half the people kind of hesitate or look at you weird. Play it straight and just spell it out if that happens. When you're called over the loudspeaker, it sounds like they're stuttering, party of four? You can also do weird funny names that are just barely believable. Yes, people, obviously not every restaurant says party. Use another name for those. As far as the loudspeaker goes, I mainly use this at a very busy breakfast joint on the weekends. They have outdoor waiting and therefore announce names. It will work for any type of calling out names. I have a pretty good memory when it comes to stories that my friends have told me, so I like to retell their own story to them a year or two later, now starring myself, and see how long it takes for them to catch on. They start off with a look of, oh man, I could tell some of the story as soon as he ends this. Then it turns into a look of, wait, that's my freaking story! A buddy of mine will randomly wish me happy birthday on Facebook when it's not my birthday. So then a bunch of other people wish me a happy birthday and I have to explain it's not my birthday. This ducker does it every year. A couple of weeks ago, he posted on my wall, "Congratulations, man! I knew you'd land that opportunity! So proud of you!" That, followed by a couple dozen people asking me what had I accomplished. I had someone whose birthday was a day before mine. At 11:45 p.m., as we ate dinner, I pointed out it was his birthday, and without question, the staff did the song, dance, and clap. At 12:01 a.m., he then told them it was my birthday. The server demanded ID. Then I got a very, very unenergetic song, dance, and clap. I swear, even the cake looked slump. Best proof I ever had that servers hate that crap. Make up a hobby or skill for your friend. Over a period of weeks or months, nonchalantly describe your friend's aptitude at this skill to your common friends or colleagues. If you pick something general enough, your friend will encounter lots of questions and it might snowball. Examples: Dan is a very good artist. He painted this for me. Show them a picture of some art someone else painted. Did you hear Dan won an award for his artistic skills? Dan is actually a really good singer. He sung in that state championships last summer. Did you know Margaret fixes watches? Bonus points if you pick someone you only vaguely know. Then you can deny starting the rumor and blame someone that knows him even better. In public places like malls or grocery stores, I nonchalantly thank random people. I say, "Hey, I saw what you did back there, and I just want to say thanks. That was great." Most people don't appreciate little things like that anymore, but I do. Then walk away. Bonus points if you pat them on the back. I knew a friend that did this once because he lost a bet and went, "I just want to thank you," and awkwardly handed him $5 and walked away. Use a fake name when ordering food for delivery. Use a different name each time, but always use the same number. After a while of doing this, they get a huge list of names after putting your phone number in whatever system they use. Pay cash each time. You can hear them hesitate for a moment as they try to figure out why there are so many names with different last names as well. Usually they'll ask if you're the person that's the most recent on their list. Always say no and give them a brand new name. I also like to use names that sound weird in a fake kind of way but aren't super obvious. Chester Elegante, as an example. At the Varsity Chicken Wings joint nearby Syracuse U, would enter name as Icarus for the announcement, "Icarus, your wings are ready." I used to work in a call center a few years ago. We had to take customers' details and I'd always repeat back to them to make sure they were correct. While doing this though, I'd duck with them by saying things like, "Oh, is that K for knife? P for pterodactyl? Yeah?" Good old silent letters. Get them heavily involved in a good conversation while standing, and just hand them something. Don't look at it. Keep the conversation going, keep eye contact, and hand them anything, from a tennis ball to a rock you just picked up. Almost every time, they'll grab it without thinking. Works even better if talking and walking. See how much stuff they can hold. Keep looking at a spot a few feet behind them with a worried expression. Look back at them and smile again. Look 3 feet behind them this time. Look a little more scared. Repeat and escalate until they get really uncomfortable and look behind them. It works even though they know you're messing with them. There was one guy in the music department who would always leave his phone on whatever desk he was working at. Every single time I'd walk by, I'd pick it up and move it slightly, no more than 6 inches away, and keep walking. I never took it. I never moved it far. I did this several times a day for several months. Then I stopped. I walked by and instinctively he went to put it back and missed. The look of shock on his face made my life. A family opened this small local theater, and we went a couple of times during October and watched Annabelle and Nightmare on Elm Street. After everyone got deep into the movie, the staff would sneak up behind us, dressed in black, and duck with us pretty hard. Their kid crawled as fast as he could down the row seats and rubbed up against our legs. That was the best one. It was freaky, but hella fun. I don't know, man. I think that would be kind of crazy to send your kids into the dark theater to mess with people as they're watching a scary movie. What if somebody stomped their foot down to the child going, "No, not today, Annabelle! Grr!"
No, please. I didn't mean to.
That's a lawsuit waiting to happen. Why would you do this? No! Stop! I had a roommate in college that rarely went out to drink, but when he did, he got completely trashed and usually ends up having no recollection what had happened. So whenever we would be drinking together, I take a handful of leaves from outside and hide them in his room in places like under his laundry pile, under his bathroom sink, in his jacket pocket, toaster, in the closet, etc. He still thinks he has a leaf hoarding habit whenever he goes out to drink with us. Wait, you had a toaster in your closet? I saw this on another thread. Can't remember the name of the hilarious person who wrote this, but start out with a subtle lisp when talking to someone you usually see on your own and when others aren't likely to be around when you speak to them. Over the coming weeks, make the lisp more prominent until you can barely be understood by that person. When it has become so bad that they cannot at all understand you, just drop it. Start talking normally again. The guy who's been trying to figure out what you're saying will be so confused. If he asked about it completely, deny it. Act baffled each time he brings it up. Bonus points if he starts asking other people. For example, Steve and Jerry, starting with Steve.
Hey, Jerry, you know the guy from accounting?
Yeah, dude, what about him?
You've heard his lisp, right? He's not got one anymore.
Jerry gives a weird look.
Dude, he's never had a lisp. I don't know what you're talking about.
Steve will be completely mind-ducked. You could also apply this to having a weird accent that suddenly drops. Not a real accent, just a really weird, unrecognizable accent that nobody can figure out. I really love bananas. I take a couple with me every day to work for mid-morning snacks. I decided to make it a habit of taking a break every time I was eating one to stroll over to a coworker's desk, chat with her while eating, and throw the peel into her garbage bin before walking back to my desk. She would deal with the smell for the rest of the day. It took a week before I got a, "If you throw that in there, I'm gonna end you." I mean, dude, I don't know. I might feel the same. I have a very sensitive nose, and if you're coming over and just dumping your crap into my garbage can that I have to work next to for the whole day and be like, "No, that is not a funny prank. That is a disaster. Please don't do this. Please, just no." If you're in a group of people, all of you line up along both sides of an exit. When someone walks out, everyone start clapping and cheering for the person. Some friends and I did this on the subway metro in Singapore while waiting for a train. Some of the reactions are priceless. My one friend and I refer to every animal as kitty, or some variation of it, i.e. wolves are howling moon kitties, meerkats are stand-up kitties, and obviously ferrets are snake kitties. We often ducked with people, like one time when I insisted that this girl's gross dog was a slobber kitty. She was super proud of having this purebred dog, so she was getting quite flustered over the whole thing and practically yelling the breed of her dog at me. The first friend I mentioned walks in after not having heard this argument, and the girl says to him, "You can tell what breed my dog is, right?" And he replies, "Slobber kitty." without missing a beat. She got so mad. Definitely a subtle one, but I like it. I work in a restaurant. As a servant to the public, it's easy to get down on your job. Subtle things really help make you feel less like a backside-kissing peasant. Almost every time I run a tray of food, I make eye contact with the nearest table that's waiting on food and give them a look and smile as if I'm coming right for them to deliver their meal. Then I pass right by them and take it to the actual table. I love when people interrupt their conversation with, "Hey, here's our food," only to be left disappointed. A little sociopathic, considering most of these people didn't do anything to me, but it's just a nice way to feel in control at a job where you are so often walked on. "It was you! You did this to me! Oh, come on! I've definitely had this happen to me somewhere before. No! Now I know your tricks! Now I know. I'm gonna watch you and bring hey, you get back here! Ah!" I looked after my buddy's house when he was on vacation. I took every photo out of its frame, scanned it, photoshopped me in somewhere, printed them, replaced in frames. Months after he got back, he called me saying his brain was telling him something was wrong, but he rarely looked at the photos anymore, so it didn't click until his sister was over and saw the altered photos. One of my best friends is generally quite impatient, and for the last 8 years, I've been purposefully waiting for the last ring whenever he phones me to answer because I know he hates it. The best part, though, is I periodically tell him every so often that I'm doing something that he hates to duck with him, but I'm not telling him what it is, which drives him nuts as he can't figure it out and often insists I'm lying. I do a bunch of things to mess with him, but this is my fave as it's the longest running, lowest effort, mildest inconvenience that gets maximum annoyance. When we're closing down my store, there's a small vestibule at the back door where we have to stand still for about 20 seconds so that we can arm the motion alarm before leaving. As a rule, no one can be in the store alone, and so some employee always has to be with me for this process. I fart every single time. If they move, then the alarm won't set and we have to stand there even longer. In high school, I would sit in the back with my buddies, and whenever we had a substitute, I would sit completely still with my mouth gaping open until drool started pouring out slowly and dripping all over my notebooks. Sub would have zero idea why someone with such a seemingly debilitating mental handicap was in a regular class. Of course, they were far too uncomfortable to say anything that might suggest something was wrong with me. On the side note, I never did the deed in high school. I was once inspired by a post here on Reddit where someone replaced one of their family portraits with a picture of Vladimir Putin. One day when our parents were at work, my brother and I did the same thing by changing out a picture of ourselves with one of Putin bottle feeding a baby goat. We thought it was inconspicuous enough to go unnoticed for a little while, but we both gave it less than a day before our parents would notice. 6 months later, I'm in the middle of my college semester and I get 2 texts. One from my brother saying, "They found Putin," and the other from my dad saying, "You clever plastard." I used to manage a fleet of company cars. One of my friends who worked with me had a car for my fleet. He doesn't know I had spare keys for all of them. The parking lot is not large. You can fit about 50 cars in it. They're all company cars, and there's no reserved parking. So, being the friendly jerk I am, shortly after he arrived at work, I would go out for my smoke break and move his car over 1 or 2 spots. Sometimes I would even reverse the car back into the same spot, if he went in front first. I shuffled his car around the parking lot every 3rd day for about 4 months straight, but never too far from his initial spot. One day after work, we were at the pub getting a pint. He says to me, "Man, I'm so tired when I get to work. Sometimes I can't even remember where I parked my car." It's been almost 2 years to this day. I still move his car, but I've reduced the frequency to about once a week. He still doesn't know. In my apartment building, there is an unprotected Xfinity Wi-Fi. I have my own Wi-Fi, so I never connect to that one, but for some strange reason, one day, my phone connected to it on its own. So not knowing it did that, I started watching YouTube on my phone and accidentally hit the Chromecast button at the top of the screen. And when I pressed it, it gave me 2 different smart TVs to cast to. I had a huge evil grin on my face. So first, I immediately searched a Rickrolled video and casted it to one of the TVs. I thought this was hilarious, but I wanted to be more clever. I started playing all sorts of different videos. Girl ripping out her hair with a drill while eating corn, 2 frap videos, South Park videos, 4 words, all uppercase. Halfway through the last video, the connection ends. I guess they finally figured out how to turn it off. So the next day, I came home from work and checked my mail, and next to all the mailboxes was a very angry letter to the whole building. Really me. Can't remember it word for word, but it said something like, "Whoever the rumpole is putting videos on our TV, please stop! We have young kids, and now they are repeating the inappropriate language that was in those videos." I immediately bust out laughing in the middle of the hallway, and believe me, I will be doing it again. I had a coworker once who was a real jerk. I started making fun of bald customers, to their face, in a friendly manner. It was a cigar store. Making light is mandatory, on a frequent enough basis when he was around to make him think I really got grossed out by bald people. I don't, and I think I'm probably going bald. It was all part of my long con. After I got him thinking about baldness on a regular basis, I brought in my shills. I talked to customers I was friends with. Under my instruction, they'd always stare at his hair when they saw him or ask, "Did you get a haircut or something?" Every time they'd talk to him. We went to the same barber. Neighborhood dude. Cut his first cigar. So I talked to the barber into asking him, "So, you want me to do anything about, like the thin parts?" After 6 months of this, he was constantly checking his hair in the mirrors, the glass around the shop, asking all the darn time if I thought he was balding. It was hands down the most sociopathic and impressive thing I have ever done in petty revenge. It was like a total of 9 months of work, involved half my customers and eventually the owner of the store. He had the thickest hair I've ever seen. People complimented him on it. But that jerk farted in my face one time while I was eating quiche, and you don't duck with a man's quiche. Wow. So this man literally went Liam Neeson on this. Like this guy just like walking around and just being dumb, be like, "Ah!" And he just looks up, his quiche ruined. "Darn you. I will remember this day. Revenge is best served cold, just like my quiche, which is now cold and smelly."
What film made you say, "Holy crap, there's still 50 minutes left"? The Sound of Music. They get married and I said, that was a nice ending, and my wife says, the Nazis haven't even arrived. Some people don't realize that The Sound of Music actually had an intermission, and they only watched half of the movie. I literally had no idea there was a second VHS tape until this Reddit thread. Maybe we bought it used because I only remember seeing the first half. The Sound of Music had Nazis? I must have only seen the first half as well. Pearl Harbor. There's a climactic attack on Pearl Harbor. It's explosive and tragic, some people getting hurt or worse, and then the movie slows down and keeps going for another hour. Ugh. Pearl Harbor is a 2-hour movie squeezed into 3 hours. Roger Ebert. The Batman. I know people love it, but I found the movie extremely boring and almost fell asleep. The car chase scene was basically him getting stuck in traffic. I've seen more exciting things happen on a Texas highway. If you just watch the trailers, you've basically seen the best parts of the movie. Save yourself the 3 hours. I should also point out, because it might not seem this way, but I love Batman, so this movie was a big letdown for me. I actually enjoyed the Batman up until the scene where he choked down that bomb and walked away with absolutely no injuries, not even the slightest burn on his face. After seeing that, I looked at the remaining time on the movie and noticed there was still almost 2 hours left. You know, that opinion isn't as controversial as the OP might make it seem. I think after Nolan did the realistic Batman in the Dark Knight trilogy, we didn't need to see that again. For me, it's Titanic. Back in the 90s where VHSs were still a thing, Titanic the movie was split between two VHS tapes. The first being all about the onboarding and the love story, while the second finally had the iceberg hit and sinking after spending all of what felt like another hour on the love story. I would always doze off before the second VHS tape got entered. My family eventually stopped playing part 1 and we would just go straight to part 2 whenever we decided to watch Titanic again. I will admit that I, then a 13-year-old boy, cried seeing Titanic in the theater. But it was because I drank a Mountain Dew too quickly and didn't want to miss the drawing scene, better than I could have hoped for. And the sinking by getting up to go use the restroom. I was the closest I've ever been to bursting my bladder. Full Metal Jacket, in an excellent way. When I was a kid, my family used to watch this on Laserdisc. I think it's the only movie we had that not only had to flip the disc, but that there was a second disc. I'm pretty sure with the multiple intermissions, this is why my family considers it a Christmas movie. Although my dad claims it's because they sing Happy Birthday to Jesus. Full Metal Jacket, the family Christmas movie that everyone loves. Daft Punk's Electroma. Good freaking God. It was a solid hour of robots walking through the desert. I love Daft Punk, but that film was excruciating even by French film standards. Which is so weird because Interstellar 5555 is totally a masterpiece. As someone who has casually listened to Daft Punk over the years, I had no idea that they had films for their music. I guess that's something I have to look into. Transformers Age of Extinction. That movie was so awful, I never even finished it. Spoiler, Galvatron runs away like a punk and Lockdown gets split in two by Optimus' thick metal rod. Then Optimus flies into space and says he's gonna destroy his creator. My husband won free tickets to that movie. We went to the cinema together. I was actually enjoying it. I found the whole thing ridiculous and not believable, but I enjoyed myself. Then there was a long time of explosions and then the movie ended, I thought. I was like, great, 90 minutes is a good length for a movie. And then they went to freaking China and took another hour to end. It was so incredibly boring, which could have all been avoided if they cut it at the 90-minute mark. The extended version of The Lord of the Rings. I didn't realize how much additional footage there was. It's all amazing though. I've run out of food and there's still 20 days of film left. Please send help. This might get me flamed in the comments, but I've never seen Return of the King, and I saw The Two Towers at a midnight screening and really enjoyed it. Black Adam. I know it was only 2 hours, but to me it felt so much longer. My husband and I thought the same thing. I paused it saying, God damn, how much longer do we have? And then we saw it was 2 hours total. Felt like a glitch in the Matrix or something. At one point during Black Adam, I legit thought the movie was over since it had a climax and then there was still another 30 minutes left. Pirates of the Caribbean: Curse of the Black Pearl. Not in a bad way. I just remember feeling like I was watching the climax and then it just kept going. Would have agreed with the sequels, but I actually thought the first Pirates was a perfect movie. My brother usually quotes Barbossa, Jeffrey Rush, when not wanting to do something. I'm disinclined to acquiesce to your request. It means no. I prefer, the code is more like what you call guidelines than actual rules. The Pirates of the Caribbean series are some of my absolute favorite films to watch. They are just straight fun. Gone Girl. In my defense, I know nothing about it and thought it was a rom-com/chick flick. Was going through a toxic divorce at the time and went to see this to take my mind off my troubles. I just sat shell-shocked afterwards. My other movie was World War Z. Near the end, there was this tense scene where he has to walk past one teeth-gnawing zombie. I let out an involuntary and inappropriate laugh at how much it resembled my ex in zombie makeup. It was meant to be a tense scene. Also, when the scientist got scared and ran and tripped down the ramp and shot himself, I was the lone person in the theater who laughed at the sheer absurdity of it. I was on my third date and my GF broke it off because she thought I was a manic. Dude, you're not alone. When he runs back to the ramp and slips and falls and accidentally shoots himself in the face, and Brad Pitt's face had just so much disappointment on it, after they spent a good 15 minutes building the scientist up as the last hope of humanity, it was hilarious. I've never seen World War Z, but I love a good bad movie. I might have to check this one out. Artificial Intelligence. Man, that movie dragged. And then it finally had the bittersweet ending and I was like, yeah, Not my thing, but I can totally see why people like it. And then it went on. That movie was the prime example of the adage that part of knowing how to paint a great masterpiece is knowing when to stop painting. Well, geez, Stanley Kubrick died before filming it. How much harder did you want him to stop? Okay, I'm not gonna lie, that joke made my jaw drop. Hateful Eight. The movie is one long conversation, but in a good way. I love that film. My uncle was in hospice having palliative care with his own room a few years ago. I asked him what his favorite films are, and I downloaded them and put them on a drive. I know what types of films he likes. He was in his 90s and loved westerns and was fine with violence in movies. So I added Hateful Eight. On the night before he died, he told the nurse that he was fine and he was going to bed to watch the rest of this really long film I had given him, which he said was great. The next morning, he got up happy, sat in his chair, and died. Okay, I wasn't expecting a movie scene to come out of this comment section, but as for the long conversation comment, isn't that all Tarantino films? Wonder Woman 1984. Can't believe I'm not seeing this mentioned already. I remember checking how long was left and saying, Jesus Christ, for real? When there was nearly an hour to go. We really enjoyed the first one, so we had a big family movie night, not something we do often, and dragged everyone in to watch the sequel. It was really disappointing. Every film ever since the internet destroyed my attention span. Honestly, one of the best parts of going to a theater is the fact that the social code of the setting forces you to disconnect. It's too easy to check your phone and get distracted by life when you're watching a movie at home. Hell, I've made it through stinkers in a theater I definitely wouldn't have if I was watching them on Netflix or Hulu. I'm looking at you, Jurassic World Dominion. Everything Everywhere All at Once. Once it hit the second half, I had no idea where it was going or how it was going to resolve in a satisfying way. But it did, and is now one of my favorite movies ever. I still want to watch that movie. It looks pretty awesome. Spicy videos after those first 2 minutes. Black Panther Wakanda Forever. It's just a lot of filler. At least the title of the film is honest. The brand new Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, in a good way. Rented the movie and was blown away early on, and seeing more time had me excited to see it through. Really glad to see DreamWorks doing well, and I recommend for others to watch it. This movie has to be one of the most go-watch word-of-mouth movies in such a long time. I constantly hear people mentioning this movie, and I thought it was gonna be something that people would pass over. Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. When bats and soups are done fighting, and you know the fight with Doomsday was still going to happen, the name of the movie was the first clue that it was going to be an overly long slog. They could have made the whole Doomsday topic into a separate movie, but nope, gotta combine it with the literal god going against a guy wearing a Coke can. I don't care what anyone says about BVS, it gave me the best Batman fight scene of all time, so I will always stand up for that movie. That Batman was so much more entertaining than realistic Batman. The new Elvis biopic. I wasn't a fan overall, but holy hell, they could have cut 30 to 40 minutes and ended up with the same film. The film had too much dialogue as well, needed a little less conversation and a little bit more action. The only scene I've seen from that film is the "he's white" scene, and it's only because it became a meme on Twitter. Star Trek: The Slow Motion Picture. The Matrix 4, didn't finish it because it was too boring. I had to watch some parts of it again because I literally slept halfway through it, and I'm a Matrix fan. I'll be honest, that movie tried to be so meta it felt like it was a parody. A History of Violence, in a good way. What seems like an ending to a typical good movie happens about halfway through the runtime. I was really stunned and excited to see where it went next. Twilight, the tree scene almost made me chuck my laptop across the room. They are so terrible that they loop back around to being fun. If you have a group of friends who were really into Twilight in middle school or high school, it forces you to relive your younger cringe self. I thought it couldn't be that bad. Surely my early 20s self wasn't that bad. Oh god, the cringe was next level. My friend and I had a great time though, binging the films over a weekend and drinking. I remember that one close family friend that took me to see it in theaters. I think I was 13. Anyways, I remember her sitting there and laughing at how horrible it was, and the teenage me was so offended. I still haven't seen those films, and I'm not sure if I ever will. I do love the lore of these movies inspiring the writer of 50 Shades of Grey though. That Zack Snyder Justice League movie. Was all excited to see it, and then about 2 hours in, I was checking how long I had left. It was about an hour. I never finished it. I think he made a good choice to have it broken into parts that had their own little title screens. It's like going to a theater and having an intermission. Shame it felt like, I might as well get through this, rather than, oh boy, can't wait to find out what happens next. But I'm glad Snyder took out the part where the Flash accidentally motorboats Wonder Woman. You know, the classic scenario that seems to pop up in Whedon movies, or at least in superhero movies. I remember it happening between Bruce Banner and Black Widow in Age of Ultron as well. I will never watch that movie again. After the 2-hour mark, I couldn't believe that there was still 2 hours left. Also, every time Wonder Woman showed up, she went into slow-mo and they played her music. It got so freaking annoying. Thor, Love and Thunder. When we saw how much time was left, we just shut it off. Fun fact, I think Thor Ragnarok is the worst MCU film. I know people won't agree, but when Bruce Banner says he's going to show who he is and then jumps off the plane to bounce off the bridge, I wanted to break my TV. Every character morphed into a child in that film. Gangs of New York. Don't get me wrong, it was a great flick, but holy crap, it dragged on. The Return of the King. It had a lot of endings for all the things it had to wrap up, and I mistakenly bought the extra large Pepsi. I also have to say Lord of the Rings Return of the King. Throw the bloody ring in, Frodo, for God's sake. The whole cinema clapped when he finally did it. When I saw it in theaters, I started gathering up my stuff 4 separate times thinking we were at the end. When it did actually finally end, I just sat there, thinking it must be a trick and I will not be fooled into putting one arm into my coat sleeve again. The Last Jedi. I was ready to leave after the space battle and thought the ships were going down to the Red Sand planet and that was going to be the credit roll. The Casino Planet side quest took forever. I'm one of those people that actually like the film only because it didn't feel like a repeat of other Star Wars films. In a good way, Saving Private Ryan. The Normandy sequence is like 30 minutes and then the rest of the movie is like 50 minutes. Gladiator had me saying, holy crap, there is only 50 minutes left? He enters the Coliseum in the second half of the movie. I felt like it had just started. I haven't watched the theatrical cut in over a decade now. The extended gives it room to breathe, better justifies the subplots with Lucia and with Maximus's old servant, and doesn't drag because the film already had me wanting more. It also gives context to the "are you not entertained" line when the slave owner says to him, "you're an entertainer" before the fight. Rewatching it for the first time in a long time recently, I found it baffling that they would cut that line when it only adds about a minute to the runtime. "Are you not entertained" is one of the most iconic lines ever. Me and my friends always throw that out when we have an epic moment in any video game we play. For me, it has to be The Omen from 2006. Not because the movie was bad or terrible, I mean honestly I don't remember it being great either, but what happened before I even entered the theater had more entertaining twists than that whole movie. At the time, I wasn't able to legally get into an R-rated movie alone, and I was supposed to watch this movie with a bunch of friends. Well, all of my friends managed to get into the theater and I was still stuck outside. So I asked a random couple if they would be willing to pretend to be my parents. The woman, who was pretty attractive, put her arm around me and helped me get in. Once I was in, I told them thank you, but before I could leave, the guy stopped me and said, "No problem, but I don't want to see you causing any trouble during the movie." And then he flashes his police badge at me. I was just so stunned that a cop just helped me get into an R-rated movie. It was a pretty cool moment and something I definitely remember more than anything in that movie. The Girlfriend Experience. People might not know this film, but it stars this actress named Sasha Grey. People of culture might know who she is. But I went to go see this film at a small art house theater and I was just waiting for the movie to be over because I thought it was so bad. There were moments in this movie where some scenes were completely overexposed and you could barely see the actors. If I'm being honest, I would have had more fun just watching some of Sasha Grey's home movies instead. I didn't know The Girlfriend Experience was a movie. I always thought it was a TV series. The more you know. Sasha Grey might not have made it as an actress, but she's doing pretty well as a Twitch streamer. Any MCU movie after Guardians of the Galaxy Part 1. I'm not sure what happened, but Disney saw the success of that movie and thought, everyone loves it because it's funny. Why not make all our characters funny? And since then, every main character seems like they need to be a comedian, and the term comic relief character has been thrown out the window into a garbage truck, taken to the dump, and had a nuclear bomb dropped on it. I honestly stopped watching the MCU after Endgame because I felt like they were leaning into the comedy over great storytelling. Plus, Endgame just felt like the perfect jumping off point with everything that happened in the movie. 2001 A Space Odyssey. Look, I respect Stanley Kubrick, and this movie was absolutely gorgeous and had a lot of shots that looked perfect, but what even was this movie? I was just so bored the whole time while I was looking at these perfectly shot scenes. The Dark Knight in the best ways. Yup, this is the one. After he finally catches the Joker, it feels like the end, but the film still has ways to go. I remember thinking, wait, it's not done yet? When I first watched it. Yeah, and the scene leading up to the catch is so dramatic and high production, it totally could have passed for a good finale. Pretty much any big superhero movie. They all have this big battle sequence about an hour and a half in, and you go, wow, okay, movie done. And then they have to build up to another, more final battle. I really liked Venom 2 for that reason. 90 minutes, I got in, they did their stuff, and I left. Top Gun Maverick, after seeing them do the real mission and Mav gets shot down, I really thought they were just gonna end it there and finish it in a sequel. But then it just kept going and it was so good. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, the entire movie is amazing, but damn does it take a while. I just felt like that whole movie was stuff almost happening with no payoff until the end. Cruella. Not 50 minutes, but I thought the movie was over when she visited the fountain and delivered the monologue to her mother. Then it still got better. Django Unchained. I really enjoyed the movie, but dear lord it could have ended like 3 times. This was Tarantino's first movie after the death of his longtime editor. In my honest opinion, his work has taken a notable downturn as a result. I'm down with Django, but Hateful Eight and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood were way too long. Avatar 2. I just wanted to piss, but the movie just dragged on too long. But with that said, the second half was really entertaining, to be fair. Yeah, I was like, dude, Jim, we're all seeing this movie in the theaters with good recliners and fancy drinks. The human bladder is not meant to absorb a pint of IPA and then watch this much water splashing around. I saw this with a friend and my summary of it was this. I felt like I had just watched 2 years of a badly edited TV series in one sitting. I still haven't seen Avatar 2, really don't have any interest. I mean, the first one was basically just Pocahontas and Ferngully mixed together. David Cronenberg's Crash. Play started out packed, then I realized after 30 minutes I was one of a handful of people left watching this messed up movie. When it finished, I was the only one of 3 left in the theater. Wow, that's all I can say. When I first read this, I thought they were talking about the movie Crash that beat out Brokeback Mountain at the Oscars for Best Picture. The Revenant. Gah, I saw that movie in theaters and it was so packed so I had to sit way too close to the screen. And it gave me such a horrible migraine. So I'm sitting there in this movie that won't end and my head is killing me. If I had been there with my husband, I would have just asked to leave, but we had gone with friends. And we hadn't driven ourselves, so I didn't feel like I could. I was so miserable. Final Fantasy: The Spirits Within. Right after the Phantom destroys New York and Alec Baldwin's friends all die, I thought, okay, we should be wrapping this up in the next 10 minutes. Nope! It was another 30 minutes of slogging through an already boring and lazy story. I had to watch Stanley Kubrick's Spartacus for a college class about 3 years ago, and it was awful. From the sound to the pacing and the 5-minute breaks that were just music and a blank screen, it was just overall a horrible experience. Eyes Wide Shut. Most boring film I've ever seen in my life, and I had to go watch it for a class so I couldn't just stop watching it. I hate that movie. And the jerk who plays only one note on the piano for 20 minutes of this horrible movie.
What is the creepiest glitch in the Matrix you've experienced? I mentioned this in another thread, but here it is again. Me and my friend were at a Chinese restaurant and we ordered a General Tso chicken dinner and shrimp lo mein dish. When we sat down, we took out both boxes and set them on the table about 2 feet apart. My friend opens the first box and we see a shrimp lo mein dish. It has all the things in there. Noodles, shrimp, fried rice. He closes the box and opens the other box. Inside that box is another shrimp lo mein dish. Shrimp, noodles, fried rice. Oh, I think. They must have mixed the order. I was just about to say this when my friend says out loud, looks like they made a mistake and gave us 2, as he opens up the first box again. Inside of it is a General Tso chicken dinner order, General Tso chicken, white rice, and an egg roll. He froze and looked at me. I looked back at him, and we sat in silence. It took us 5 or so minutes to collect ourselves. I have no idea what the frick happened. Not creepy, but so vivid and distinct that I still think about it years later. I had a, subjectively, long, involved dream where I was a vendor at a fish market. I remember getting up early, dressing, doing a whole morning routine, going to get tea, heading out to the docks, buying fish, loading them in a cart and going to get ice, then haggling for ice, buying some less fresh fish while I was at it, then going to a market to my stall, setting up and selling fish all day. It was so real. I talked to friends, smoked nasty cigarettes, haggled customers, ate lunch, had tea, and just lived through the day. At the end of the day, I cleaned up, counted my cash, paid the stall rent, went home, cooked some of the fish I hadn't sold, along with some veggies and rice that I traded for. I drank more tea, relaxed for a while, then drew a hot bath, soaked and smoked some more cigs, then went to bed. The next morning, I woke up refreshed, ready to go down to the docks to buy fresh catch. Except I was in my house, next to my wife, truck parked outside, and it was Saturday. No work. My wife and I were getting geared up to go skiing in Oregon and the car was already packed. Weird thing was, in the dream, I was single and a smoker. I'm not. And the whole long dream had been in fluent Chinese. The effortless kind of fluency that only comes from a lifetime of speaking it. Oh, and I had been Chinese. I'm a big, hairy white dude, somewhat fluent in Spanish, and I know a little bit of Russian, but it was just weird. I've never worked in a fish market. I wonder who I was. I wonder what that was. I've experienced deja vu a couple of times when I was younger, and while that is certainly freaky, nothing beats the opposite. Jamais vu, which I experienced twice during a period of work-related stress a few years ago. On both occasions, I was driving in my car in perfectly familiar surroundings near my home, when suddenly I had no idea where I was or where I was going. It was like being instantly teleported to a foreign country. It only lasted seconds, but very creepy nonetheless. Until it happened to me, I had no idea that this even existed. Edit, for those of you concerned about my health. Yes, I did see a doctor, and so should you if something like this happens to you more than once or lasts longer than a few seconds. My episodes were stress-induced, but more serious conditions can also cause the symptom. Edit 2. If you're on drugs, well, there's your problem. Oh boy, you guys would love where I work. Weird things happen here all the time, but I'll just talk about one of the creepiest moments I've experienced here. I work as a security/nighttime attendant at an apartment building. It's 24 stories and one of the oldest buildings in the city. One night I'm sitting here when the phone rings at about 3 a.m. and I answer, "Hello, this is Draven at the front desk. How can I help you?" The voice on the other end sounded female but was totally garbled and the only bit I could make out was 23rd floor. I tried to tell the person I couldn't understand them and asked what apartment they were in, but again, garbled response and 23rd floor. After the third time of trying to understand them and getting the same response, I said since I couldn't understand them, I'd have them come up to meet me in the hallway. So I go to the main elevators, and both are up on the, surprise, 23rd floor. Luckily, we have an older service elevator, and it's only on the 7th floor, so I call it down. I get it and hit the button for the 23rd floor, but it won't move and the inner door won't close, so I go to unlock the reset panel and boom, we start going up. Door still open. I'm freaking out, and the elevator is shaking because it goes pretty fast and it's old. As I'm going up, I just stay towards the back and finally I reach floor 23. I step out, door closes just fine, and I look around the hallway. There's nobody around. I walk along slowly trying to listen for anyone awake who might have called, but there's nothing. So now I head the opposite direction and go towards where the regular elevators are, and when I get to them, they're just sitting there with their doors open. I was pretty freaked out, but I knew it could just be the elevators on the fritz, so I get in and figure I'll just reset them when I get to floor 1, when I hear the sound of the back stairwell closing. So I quickly get out and go to the stairwell, and lo and behold, no one's there, but the maintenance door to the machine room is ajar, and at that time, I'm the only one in the building with the key. At the top of the building is a large machine room housing all the really, really loud machinery that does stuff in the building and allows access to the roof. I don't like going into it because it's creepy as heck, and no one ever goes in there. So at this point, I'm seriously freaked out, but I muster up and head in. I shout, "Hello?" and there's no response. The lights in this room flicker because they're crappy fluorescent, so I can't see well either. But at the end of the room, I can make out the roof access door, and sure as heck, it's slightly open. So I slowly continue forward, checking the space in between each machine as I walk by. And there's no one there, so I open the roof access door. I can't see anyone ahead of me on the roof, but there is a slight wraparound, and if there was a jumper or something, I needed to be sure, so I step out and leave the door ajar just like it was. Almost immediately, the door is pulled shut. Now, I might have written it off as wind or something, but this door is hard to shut and hard to open. Really hard. I immediately grab the handle and yank it open, slam it behind me, and run straight for the maintenance door. It automatically locks when it's closed, so I slam it shut too and go back to the 23rd floor hallway, get into an elevator, door still open, and go all the way down to the first floor. I go back to the main lobby, and as soon as I sit down, the phone rings. I pick it up, don't say a word, and sure as heck, garbled voice again, only audibly saying 23rd floor. I hung up the phone, turned the ringer off, and spent the rest of the evening just staring at the parking garage security monitor. There's been a bunch of creepy things happen at this building. It's basically like the Overlook Hotel at night. I walked past a dark room here on the first floor once and swore I saw myself standing inside it. The next night, as I'm inside said room cleaning, the lights flip off and I turn around to see a quick flash of myself walking past. TLDR, creepy ghost or some crap played games with me at work by trying to lure me onto the roof of the building. I knew my uncle had died. My mom had called me and told me the news. It was very sad. She told me in the middle of work and I told one of my coworkers. He expressed his condolences on my loss. A couple weeks later, my sister mentioned my aunt and uncle doing something. I said, but he's dead. And my sister said, no, he wasn't. I called my mom. No, he wasn't dead. To this day, I'm still not sure how much of it my brain imagined and how much of it was real. Did I really talk to my coworker? Was I even on the phone with my mom at all that day? It still freaks me out knowing that my mind could fabricate so complete and real a memory like that. This happened to my dad, so it's not exactly a personal story. Anyway, my dad was driving down a long, lonely highway in Ohio, doing about 90 in a Z28 with a radar detector. Rolling hills and whatnot meant that cops could hide at the bottom before you could see them and slow down. So, all of a sudden, his radar detector starts blaring and he slams on the brakes. Right over the hill, there's a squad car running radar. He's super relieved, but when he looks at the detector, it's not even on the windshield. It was unplugged and in the glove compartment. What the heck? TLDR, ghost radar detector kept my dad from getting a ticket. Posted this in a previous sub a while back, but I'll post it again as it fits here too. I had just turned 22 and my parents had sold their house and purchased a place out in the country. On the property, there was a big shed not far from the house that I decided to turn into my place. Now, I felt kind of uncomfortable in the shed, but sometimes my dog kept me company, so it wasn't so bad. Anyway, I had been in there maybe 2 weeks, and one night I'm on the computer, my dog asleep at my feet, and I need to pee, so I get up and go outside to pee. It's a beautiful, clear night, and the stars were incredible. Next thing I hear the shed door slam behind me. I turn immediately and try to open it, but it won't budge. Now, from the inside the shed, I can hear my dog start to growl, quietly at first, then louder. Now he's barking, and I'm panicking trying to get the door open. I must mention that I'm 6'5" and well-built, play sports, etc., but even ramming my full weight into the door won't open it, and I'm really panicking now as my dog's barks turn into whines, then whimpering, then silence. And with all my might, I slam into the door and it flies open. The light is off inside now, and it's pitch black. It won't turn back on, and I'm in complete darkness. Can't see my dog anywhere, and I stumble around trying to find a torch. Finally, I find it, and pick it up, and turn on my torch, and I wasn't prepared for what I'd see next. My dog had literally squashed itself into the furthest, darkest corner of the room, eyes closed and shaking violently. I immediately moved towards him, and as soon as I got within reach of him, he leapt at me into my arms and wouldn't move. I picked him up and swear I've never ran so fast in my goddamn life. I never stepped foot in that shed ever again, and my dog wouldn't even go near that part of the property. I don't know what happened in that shed that night, but I'll never forget it. Have a few, but this one stands out. I was catching a SkyTrain in one particular city about 15 minutes from where I get off. While I wait, there's a woman with glazed eyes asking people for money. She came up to me, stopped briefly, and asked, "Excuse me, could you spare some money? My brother is in the hospital and I'd like some money to buy him some flowers." That's rich, I thought. Drug addicts are getting more and more obvious with their lines. Here's $5. Gave it to her without even looking her in the face, convinced of her intentions. Anyways, my train pulls up and I get on. I look through the glass at her, walking around asking others for money as the train pulls away. The train arrives at the station 15 minutes later, and I walk down and out to the bus stop. There's only one bus the direction I'm going, and just my luck, it is there waiting when I get off the train. So on the bus, I hop and wait for the bus driver to finish reading his paper before the doors close and we embark down the highway. About 5 to 10 minutes traveling, the driver pulls over for a routine stop. The doors open, and to my complete astonishment, the woman from the SkyTrain walks into the bus, a dozen roses in hand. She looks me right in the eyes as she walks past to take her seat. How in the blue heck did she get there? I took the train before her. I watched her at the train stop from inside as we pulled away. I went over a river. I caught the first and only bus going this particular direction, and not only did she beat me there, she had time to go to a store and buy a dozen roses. To this day, I have no idea how this happened. A little backstory. I was a total idealist back in high school, so when choosing a college, I chose to go somewhere that none of my friends were attending, so that I could strike out on my own in a finding myself sort of way. Well, I ended up making a few really close friends my first semester. I mean, these guys became like a family to me in a matter of months. One day during winter break, one of those guys, my buddy Kimbo, had gone back home to visit friends and family, and on his return trip to our college, he hit a bad patch of ice and got into a car accident and was killed. It hurt like a son of a gun for a long time, and I still think about him all the time. But anyways, a few weeks after Kimbo's accident, me and the rest of the guys were getting back from a party off campus, and as we were standing outside our dorm building smoking a cig, I felt my phone vibrating, and when I pulled it out, I saw that I was getting a call from Kimbo's phone. Dumbfounded, I showed my friends the phone quickly and then answered. When I picked up, it just went directly to his voicemail, which played the same message it always had. It never happened again, and we never really talked about it, but for me, it was one of those someone's looking after me moments. I hadn't been doing very well after his death, but seeing his name show up on my cell phone screen one final time made me feel a whole lot better for a time, and really helped me get out of the slump I was in. I have no idea how his phone could have possibly called me, and I doubt I ever will, but this was one glitch in the Matrix that I'll forever be thankful for. Rest in peace, Kim. But feel free to call again. When I was like 10 or 11, I was going to the beach with my aunt and her friends. There were 2 cars of us. To get there, we had to go through a very large industrial area. We didn't know the direction, so our car was following the other. Suddenly, they did an unexpected turn, and so our driver had to take a sharp bend. In that moment, we heard a very clear, loud voice inside the car saying, laughing, "Sharp bend, The driver immediately hit the brakes. We looked at each other, puzzled. We all recognized it as a voice not belonging to any of us. In the very same time, we noticed that the other car stopped as well. The other driver got out of the car with a scared face and shouted to us, Did you hear that as well?" They heard the very same thing inside their car. The area around was fully deserted. Edit. Wow, thanks for the interest. A little bit of background. This happened in central Italy in the early 90s. My aunt used to act all the time, and most of the other guys were theater actors. The voice scared the crap out of us because it was very clear, near but not coming from a direction within the car you could distinguish, nor front nor rear. Inside the car, but from no distinct place. It was like mocking us. We were scared, but soon someone started to say, "Hey, which one of you did that?" Remember, these were comedy actors who used to do any sort of strange voice. This was till we noticed the other car stopping and saw the look of the guy driving that car. They were all as scared as us and told us we heard this scary voice inside our car and told the very same words we just heard. We were there on a hot day under the sun in an area with large streets and absolutely nothing and no one around us. No cars, no people, no buildings. We never figured out what happened. One night, I had a dream about being in a car with my sister at the church we went to. For some reason, it started going out of control, so I jumped to the wheel and tried to keep us from dying. Later, I told my sister about the dream, and she had the exact same dream, but instead she was the one at the wheel and not me. About a year ago, I had a terrible nightmare. It started off me waking up in bed during a thunderstorm. As the room illuminated again and again from the flashes of lightning outside, I realized that the bed I was laying in wasn't mine. The head of the bed was against the wall the door was located on, and from my perspective, I couldn't tell if it was open or closed. That is, until I saw the face. At first, just the nose and jaw broke past the doorframe, but then an entire face slowly passed through the doorway. I tried to yell, "Who the heck are you? Where the heck am I?" But it felt like I had lost my voice. No matter how hard I tried to scream, nothing came out and this person continued to enter the room, looking dead ahead away from me. Then, just as the person was completely into the room, their head snapped towards me and it locked eyes with mine. I tried to get out of the bed, but felt completely paralyzed. The person started making their way to me, but with every step their body contorted in ways that would break a normal person's bones. Their necks snapped so the back of their head touched their back. Their jaw laid flat on their chest. Their arms had broken at the shoulders and migrated to their back like wings. Just terrifying things. And just before they reached me, I woke up. The next day I told my mom about it and went into a great deal about the room. Turns out it was almost an exact copy of my room when I was a baby. We moved out of that house when I was super young. I have no idea what the insides to any room look like. Just kinda weird, I guess. Edit. So I guess I have sleep paralysis. Cool. As I'm typing this, I already feel deja vu. I've always wanted to share this part of my life with someone, but have never been able to. So I'll just tell a bunch of people on the internet. One day I was walking to work and all of a sudden had an urge to walk a different path than usual. I work downtown in a big city. It was a strange spur-of-the-moment urge to walk a different way that changed my life forever. I turned into an alley I had never seen before. As I remember it, I made it about 15 feet or so when an actual glitch happened. Everything in my mind scrambled. I felt like I didn't have a body anymore, just that I was a semi-conscious entity floating through some weird dimension. All of a sudden, in the array of different colors and shapes, a vision came to me. It was a bunch of strange-looking people that in my mind resembled businessmen in suits. They looked startled and panicked that I could see them. One of the people made a quick movement and everything turned to black. When I regained normality, I was on a completely different street. It was the same street that I always used to walk to work. I felt sick and severely disturbed/depressed. I've never done any hard drugs, never experienced any hallucinations, never have had anything like this happen to me. The weird thing is, when the glitch was correcting itself and I could see those people watching me like a caged animal, I had the feeling that I knew I was being controlled. It still bothers me very much to this day. TLDR, had a moment of spontaneity, caused a real-life glitch, life has seemed different ever since. During a spinal tap procedure, I was put under. While under the anesthetics, I had what I can only explain as an out-of-body experience, seeing as how my viewpoint was from above my body, looking down on the procedure. I watched the whole thing and saw that the doctor knocked my Game Boy off the tabletop while walking by, batteries ejecting from the fall. One fell in sight and he picked it up, but the other was next to the front left wheel under the bed out of his view. But not mine. I woke up groggy and told him where my other battery was, and he was shocked when he found it there. To this day, it still weirds me out. When I was a teenager, I had 2 really intense dreams one night. The first one was about an online friend of mine calling me to say she'd broken up with a boyfriend, and I sang a few lines of Seal's Don't Cry to her over the phone. The second dream was finding a real-life friend's dead body floating in her bathtub. I didn't think anything of it up until I logged on that evening, and the online friend came online to tell me her boyfriend broke up with her. I immediately asked if I could call her, and she said no. I remember thinking that it meant something, like I could change it. Not long after, my phone rang, and it was the real-life friend from the dream calling me. I was completely freaked out at this point, but talked to her normally. She was just talking about school and things. Up until I realized I heard a splash in the background. I asked her, "Are you in the tub?" And when she said yes, I felt like my heart had stopped. I asked her, "What did you do?" She didn't answer me right away, and then after a very long pause, she told me she'd taken an entire bottle of pills and chased it with mushrooms and vodka. She'd gotten scared waiting for it to hit her, so she called me so she could hear someone's voice. I hung up and called 911. By the time they got there, she was unconscious but alive. Today, she's a mom to a beautiful little girl, and she's okay. About a year ago, my girlfriend and I went to eat dinner at Chipotle's. It's in a smallish shopping area with the burger joint and payway neighboring the Chipotle, one of those kind of upper-classy type shopping areas. We pulled into the parking lot in front of the establishments at around 5 p.m. on a Friday evening to find an empty parking lot. There were no tables outside, there were no cars in the parking spots, not a person in sight, and even the lights inside the buildings were off. Completely confused, I took the car in a sort of loop around the building in order to leave. The only thing of interest was a single fire truck parked alongside the building, headlights on but no emergency lights, and no one in the truck. It struck us a little odd. Maybe a fire in the building? As we pull around the backside of the building and then finish looping around, we drive past the front facade of the building. Except this time, every parking spot is full, tables are outside with patrons at them, food half eaten. There's people walking around, and the lights inside the buildings are all on. But the fire truck was gone. Mind you, it took less than 30 seconds to make a circle around the building. Easily one of the strangest things I've ever experienced. More Adjustment Bureau than Matrix glitchy. I've posted this before elsewhere, but here goes. Sorry, this is a long read. I'm from Finland, and that's also where these things I'm about to describe to you happened. This was some years ago, pre-smartphone GPS era. It was the end of the summer, and myself and 2 friends were on a camping trip way up in the north in Lapland. The mosquito season was over, and the weather was cooling down in anticipation of the coming fall. The 3 of us had packed food and gear for a 10-day trek. The car we arrived in had been left at the parking lot of a visitor center. This happened within the premises of the Urho-Kekkonen National Park, a 985 square mile stretch of wilderness near the Russian border. The terrain there varies greatly, from treeless and semi-mountainous to dense forest of spruce and pine and dwarf birch. There are lots of swamps. Seeing reindeer is not uncommon, and some nights you might hear wolves in the distance. You could run into a bear or a wolverine in this place, but of course normally they avoid people. We mostly camped in a tent, but some nights we used shelters and simple huts provided for travelers free of charge. The trip had lasted 5 days. We were at the furthest of any kind of civilization when we were going to be on that particular outing, truly in the middle of nowhere. There really is nothing there. There are no villages, towns, or industry. The place is a national park after all. Seeing other hikers happen from time to time, you'd see some people in the distance maybe. Very rarely would you come face to face with anyone. So, in the middle of our trip, we were camped in a small clearing, woodland extending around us for a considerable distance in all directions. It was already dark, we had eaten our evening meal, and all 3 of us were jammed in our only tent. It was a bit cramped, but we fit. We took turns carrying it during the hikes. We were just exchanging some jokes and crude humor in the dark, like guys in their 20s do, about to go to sleep in our sleeping bags. When we quieted down, we began to hear it, talking, and the sound of machinery. Given our location, this was profoundly weird. We camped in a tent because there were no huts nearby. Maybe there was another camp somewhere near us? We couldn't quite make out what was being said, but it was a human voice, no doubt about it. But nothing really could explain the sound of heavy machinery. It sounded like an excavator or a tank, something big, powerful, and really not too far away. Combined with the sound of talking, we thought construction yard. But at that time of night, in an unpopulated protected nature reserve, we got out of our tent. It was cold and pitch black. The campfire had some coals still glowing. We took out our flashlights. My two buddies have always been a lot braver than me. The sound was clearly coming from the north, maybe half a kilometer away. We thought the construction might be going on behind a small hill some distance away. We could see no lights or anything. We still could not make out what was being said. The speaking-like voice was monotonous, and it was impossible even to say what language was being used. Still sounded a lot like a person speaking, though. You may be aware of the sort of spooky phenomenon of hearing a human voice in static. Maybe you've used a blow dryer and been sure someone is talking, turn it off and it was just something the brain tried to interpret from the steady hum. Maybe it was sort of like that, it's hard to explain. The machinery-like sound continued, not loud, but you could sort of make out the powerful engine, at times accelerating or adding power, at times at idle. My two friends resolved to go find out what was going on. We put our warm clothes back on, donned boots, and I sat next to the dying fire, adding some more wood to it. I would stay at camp while my buddies left to check out this mystery construction yard in the middle of nowhere in the Lapland woods. So there I sat. The guys took out their maps, took a compass heading out, and left. I could hear them make their way through the forest and see the light fading from their flashlights. Then they were gone. The weird sounds continued, unaltered. They were gone 15 minutes, then maybe 30, then the better part of an hour. It was odd, judging by the volume of the sound. They should have reached it, checked it out, and been back already. I added more firewood and tried to make out what the person talking was saying, but it was too tinny and obscure. The guys had been away for over 2 hours. I figured they had stayed for coffee with the construction guys or something. Then, the sound stopped. Just like that. It just ended all at the same time. The engine sound and the voice both just quit. It was very silent. I waited for another 30 minutes, very worried now that something bad had happened, that maybe my friends were lost. Should I go and try to find them? I shouted their names several times and built the fire pretty big. I was scared out of my mind when suddenly I saw the flashlights of my friends. Apparently they were returning in a hurry. The guys got back to camp out of breath. They told me the following. They had followed the sound beyond the small ridge in the distance. There was nothing there, and it seemed like they were not getting any closer to the source of the sounds. They had to stop every now and again, be quiet, and listen to it to be able to walk towards it. They walked and stopped like this for some time, then realized they were not getting any closer. The sounds did not change in volume at all. They decided to go just a bit further several times, when suddenly the sound just stopped like someone pressed a button on a recording. They realized they had been going on for a long time. They were in the middle of the dark woods, alone. They reversed the heading and started back at a brisk pace. Eventually, they saw my huge fire from the top of a hill and found their way back. The weird thing is, we seemed to think the sound stopped at different times. They had been gone 2.5 hours in total. They said the sound stopped at around the 1 hour 15 minute mark after they left. Then they started to head back immediately, return trip taking a bit longer, even though they kept a good pace. They apparently wandered around for a bit. For me, the sound stopped at the 2 hour mark, just 30 minutes before they returned. We did not sleep that night. Nothing more on that trip happened, and we never found out what the weird construction yard-like sound was about. When we returned to the park's visitor center some 5 days later, we asked around, but no one knew of any ongoing construction taking place in the whole national park area. It's been bugging me ever since.
Cops of Reddit. What's the stupidest thing or crime someone did right in front of you? I worked as a small town sheriff's deputy in a rural country. One night, I was running code to a domestic disturbance at a home a couple miles away. I was cresting a hill and noticed a pair of headlights in my lane of travel on a 2-lane road. I pulled up and noticed a beat-up old yellow pickup truck with the driver's side door open facing me and blocking the road. I then noticed a disheveled-looking man standing in the ditch, sheepishly holding an obviously upset raccoon by the tail. I stepped out of the car and yelled to the man politely, inquiring as to what was happening. He shrugged his shoulders and yelled, "Sorry, forensic Sasquatch," before pitching the raccoon into the bushes. I didn't have time to ask questions, but told him to move the car out of the way so I could get to my domestic. Months later, I ran into the gentleman in town, and he introduced himself as the raccoon guy. I asked him what had happened, and he told me, I was driving along and saw 2 raccoons trying to get into the same culvert, and they got stuck. I told myself, I'll bet I could grab one of them if I tried, and went and grabbed him by the tail. Ooh, boy, was he sure mad. I asked him what he was planning to do with the raccoon, and he just shrugged and gave me a quizzical look. My roommate was a cop. We were walking home after work. I passed right by the station on my way home, and she'd usually join me. She was still in uniform, badge and all. We passed by a liquor store and a group of kids surrounded us and asked us to buy them liquor. She said, "How old are you?" They said, 16. That's why we can't buy it ourselves. She asked them after she arrested them why they'd approach a uniformed police officer of all people. Their answer, "We didn't think you were a real cop because you're a woman." Wow! So these children must be very educated. Someone please cue the Curb Your Enthusiasm theme song as they're all just being arrested and handcuffed behind them. Bum, bum, bum. You kids are dumb and you're going to jail. You're going to be in juvie with the record. Oh, geez. So many. Probably the guy who asked me how much illegal substances I wanted to buy. I was in full uniform, but he was looking down counting the rocks in his palm at night. I laughed and said, "I'll take all of it." He said, "That's going to be like $50 then." As he looked up at me, realizing the error in his ways upon seeing me, he ate them all. He got out of going to jail right then, but got a warrant for destroying evidence and a ride to the hospital to have his stomach pumped. So, kind of worth it for him, I guess. We just went through this literally last time. Bum, bum, bum. You're not going to jail, but you're going to go in the hospital having your stomach pumped because you are stupid. Pardon my Joker laugh there. Driving down a two-way road, one lane each way, car up ahead of me on my lane makes a U-turn from the curb. He was parked. Then proceeds to swerve towards my lane, driving on the wrong side of the road. I slow down. He honks at me as if I'm in his way. He swerves back to his lane and keeps driving. I stop him ultimately after he hit the curb trying to pull over. Yup, guess who got a DUI? Not a cop, but I was behind the Dumbo who did it in front of the cop. Near my mom's house is a bunch of horse property, so it's normal to see guys go by on their horses. I was behind a black SUV and see a police car parked facing the street. The Dumbo in the SUV slowed down just to veer closer and rev his engine at the horses. One was calm, but the other was freaking out. The cop's sirens came on so fast, it surprised me. Guy got his horse under control, and the Dumbo in the SUV got pulled over. I deal with stupid every day at work, but here's one that I always like to tell. Back when I was working gang units, we were in a residential neighborhood in East LA at night. We hear a car do a huge, long burnout. It sounded really close. We turn off our lights and wait for some weapon fire, but never heard any. Just then, a car goes flying by us. We turn on the lights and go after him. He pulls over right away and starts apologizing to us, saying that his foot slipped off the clutch. Yeah, right. A burnout that long and your foot slipped? Turns out, he just broken up with his girlfriend and he went to her house to do the burnout in front of it. Now, the interesting thing about working gangs is we don't do traffic or answer calls unless it is gang-related. We muck with gang members. But we had to stop because of what he did in the neighborhood we were in. Since this guy wasn't a gang member, we were just going to let him go. We hadn't even run his license or even asked for it yet. Now here is where it gets stupid. He looks at us and says, "Can I ask you something before you take me to jail?" My partner and I look at each other, ask him for his ID, and run it. Turns out, he had a $15,000 warrant for his arrest. He was seconds away from going home and ended up in jail that night. Funny thing is, I don't think he ever asked the question. I was military police, and this happened back in 2012. I was doing a routine building check on one of the schools on base. Due to our security posture that day, I was in full battle rattle and had my piece with me at 6'2" and 220 pounds. I am an enormous person with all that body armor and such on. I turn the corner to check the backside of the school and see two teenagers sitting on a picnic table outside one of the doors. Mind you, this is a Saturday, so there's nobody in the building. The kid sees me, a giant wall of weaponry, and immediately throws something under the little PE shed. My first thought was the leaf. We're on a military base, you can't have that crap. So I asked the kid what he just threw, and he immediately starts crying. The girl he was with had such a bewildered look in her face at the sight of him breaking down like that. Admittedly, I was also a bit surprised. The girl was 16 and the guy was 15. She told me that it was just a cigarette, so I made the boy fish it out from under the shed. Sure enough, it was just a Camel Crush cig, not even broken yet. "Are your parents home?" I asked the boy. He shook his head. You live on base, right? Go smoke these in your dad's garage. It's Saturday anyway. Why are you here in school property? I'm not going to arrest you." Suddenly he stopped crying and started praising me for being the coolest cop ever and thanking me for not bringing him in, as if smoking a cig was a huge deal on a military base full of nuclear weapons. Later that day, coincidentally, also on school building check, I found two 14-year-old boys sitting against the wall eating honeysuckle flower petals. So, that was weird. I was out at a client's site to burn some camera footage for the police, and due to the slow DVD burner, I found myself outside having a smoke break with the detective that came to collect it. We were shooting the crap back and forth about the weather when a homeless guy walked up and asked for a light. Duct tape jacket and shoes? Check. Overpowering smell of mold, waste, and burning tires? Check. While I was doing the mental math of, is this guy likely to try a runner with my Zippo in front of a cop? The detective produced a book of matches and told him to keep them. The homeless guy walked 10 feet away to an illegally parked Crown Vic belonging to the cop, sat on the hood, and started emptying his pockets. An illegal substance pipe, 2 Bic lighters, 1 crushed pack of illegal substances, and a handful of plastic baggies. Detective elbowing me and whispering, "He's lucky I have places to be." Finally, the guy found what he was looking for, a pathetic little pinner of an herbal leaf, wedged in the cigarette pack and lit up using one of the lighters. Detective still whispering,
Bet he doesn't even share.
I let out a snort, which the homeless guy apparently didn't appreciate. He looked straight at me, then straight at the cop, and the flash would have lost to this 90-pound white dude in duct tape shoes. He was half a block away and around the corner before his rolled-up leaf stopped rolling around on the sidewalk. I was training a rookie. We were the same unit with the same designator, a radio call sign. I called dispatch my police radio. 240 Alpha is what I said, indicating that we, 240 Alpha, were calling dispatch. My rookie was standing directly next to me, like right beside me. He got on the radio and said, 240 Alpha, go ahead. Thinking the dispatcher was calling him. In short, he answered himself on the radio. The dispatcher was confused. I wonder how long they kept him like that after he said what he said. I just want to know if they were just staring at him the whole while.
"Oh boy, this isn't good. Dispatcher's gone quiet. What do we do, sir?"
I don't know. Why don't you ask him again? And just may I remind you, do you see this piece of paper?
"Yeah?
What does it say right there?
240 Alpha. Yeah, I know."
Uh-huh. And do you see the names beneath that?
"Well, hey, wait a minute. That's my name." "Oh, that's my name."
Yeah, that's your name. My agency is the primary agency responsible for boat patrol in my area. One July weekend, my partner and I are just beginning an afternoon shift on the water when another boater flags us down. We make our way over, expecting them to be having mechanical trouble or something. Nope. 2 guys on board, and the operator tells us he wants us to write him a ticket for his expired registration. Says he was just given a warning last weekend and knew we'd catch him anyway. So, might as well get it over with. Pretty good, right? Not done. Eventually, we put our boat on the lift and get off the water to grab dinner. While eating, we get a call from dispatch that a boater had just called in a complaint about another boat that was operating dangerously and nearly caused an accident. We make our way back there, and sure enough, it's the boat from earlier. Turns out they had asked us to write them a ticket earlier because they thought that would keep us from stopping them later after they had gotten intoxicated. Didn't want that OWI, and still not done. This time, when we stopped them, there is an additional person on board, an intoxicated girl that they allowed to operate their boat. We check her ID, says she's 22, but can't get a return on it. It's fake. She's underage, and they knew it. Now she's going to jail for OWI, among other things, and they are getting charged with furnishing alcohol to a minor. Good thing they got that registration ticket out of the way earlier. I am completely unsurprised. Just about every boater at the marina I live near are alcoholics that do stupid crap just like this. My mother does security at an abandoned waterfront hotel, and every single freaking time she has to tell half those boaters, abandoned private property, for your own safety, there's no trespassing, even though they've been there 15 times before, just because they were too crap-faced last time to remember. And every time they're like, "What? Really? No way!" Like they can't believe the place is dangerous, even though the place is literally falling in on itself. There was this one guy who would stand on property and talk to her for 5 to 15 minutes, despite being told to leave and getting no reception from her. Then she called 911 after watching him book it from one of the rooms and finding a lab inside. Since she knew him, she was able to point to which boat he lived in, and he was getting arrested. He was like, "But I thought we were cool!" No, not even a little bit. Especially not cover up your illegal substance lab and probably become a felon in the process. Cool. Not a cop, but I saw it happen. I worked at a pretty busy nightclub and I watched a man pick up a woman's purse and walk away with it, out toward the parking lot. I saw him get into the passenger side of a vehicle by himself with the purse. I informed one of the off-duty police officers that we'd hire for security. The officer approached the vehicle and turns his flashlight on to catch the guy in the middle of taking a Snapchat video of himself chugging cheap vodka. Turns out, it was his cousin's purse and he needed the car keys. Stupid thing is it was dollar drink night, so how much was he really even saving? At least he got a good Snapchat out of it. Not a cop, but one day a massive water main burst in town and knocked out a couple streets. They put the cops in the ends to make sure nobody went down them. I was driving on a late afternoon and nobody else was really around, so pretty quiet. A young female cop was standing on the corner when over the road from her, some guy wandering down the street jumps up and starts swinging from the road closure sign and then pulled it down. The look on her face was one of pure, "Are you freaking kidding me right now?" Drove off before anything else happened, but I imagine that went poorly for him. Two of my cousins are in their last year of cop school, so this summer they visited us from the city, and my dad took them fishing at the local lake. Some tourists in an RV were camped illegally, doesn't bother us locals since it is out of the way, and hadn't had any luck fishing. They saw the catch my dad was carrying and asked if they could buy it. He said he could give it to them for free since we already had dinner. The tourists then gave my dad at least 5 big cartons of cigarettes as payment, and it is almost 100% smuggler goods from the border. My dad turned around and saw my two cousins literally sitting on the ground laughing. My partner was writing a ticket while I was documenting the stop via the patrol car's computer. We were on a city street next to a dramatically curved freeway off-ramp. We hear a tremendously loud screeching of brakes and a crashing sound that went on for a few seconds. We turn around and an SUV is on its roof. A tire is rolling across the intersection. We put it out over the air and run over. I looked inside my flashlight, and there were multiple bodies all over the SUV. The fire department arrived and cut them out. They were all badly injured, and the driver was gone. Drive safe and pay attention, guys. There's a reason my partner was writing a freaking speeding ticket. Not a cop, but was a teenager who did something stupid. My buddy and I were at a stoplight in Princeton, New Jersey, one summer evening, and a town cop pulls up next to us, and for some unknown reason, I turned to my buddy and said, "Hey Dave, put away that illegal substance pipe." Needless to say, we get immediately pulled over and 3 more cops come rolling up. Not hard. We were also 50 yards from the police station. My buddy's car was registered in PA, so it was extra special for the cops. Neither my buddy nor the cops were terribly happy with me that day. After a thorough search of our persons and the car, where nothing illegal was found, the cop turns to me and says, "In the future, you should make sure your hummingbird rump doesn't get in the way of your crocodile mouth." I still laugh about it to this day. This was sometime around 1992. Opposite side of the story, officer pulled me over for driving through downtown with my brights on at 2 a.m. Intoxicated, I reach up to turn them off. As he told me why he pulled me over, I hit my windshield washers instead and sprayed him. He let me go, but he followed me as I drove around the block to drop off a buddy. Pulled in behind my friend's car so he can go home. He literally falls out of my car, beer in hand, six-pack in the other. Lights come on, and the cop gets out and approaches us. Turns out my buddy was his training officer. Lets us both go with the promise that we aren't going anywhere until we sober up. I walked across the street to a friend's place. Cop leaves. Buddy takes off. Not really a cop, but maybe the cop who handled me will remember this story. Picked up Call of Duty at a GameStop, which was quite a drive away from me, and I wasn't too familiar with the area. The main street had a ton of traffic, so I decided to use side streets without looking at my GPS and ended up driving into what looked like an abandoned factory. Had no clue where I was, but I drove slowly past the open gate, which appeared unattended at the moment, and attempted to make a U-turn back out. Right as I'm about to exit, the cop holds out his hand and yells, "Hey you! What do you think you're doing?" I had no clue where I was, but I knew I mucked up. I rolled down the window and the officer, in a very distinct Australian accent, says, "So, you enjoy running stop signs?" Had no clue there was a stop sign, but I didn't make a complete stop, so I just felt a huge fine coming my way. Told him I had no clue where I was and that I was really sorry. I just wanted to play some video games, man. He goes on to tell me that I was in the DWP, Department of Water and Power, and if I drove any further down, the guards were authorized to shoot me and that I could have been terminated since they were on red alert. After he asks me to pull over and check my license plate, make and model, etc., he tells me that they'll send my info to the FBI and look for any infractions or criminal records. None, by the way, but okay. Told him again I was sorry, and dude just kept saying, "Leave, leave, leave." I feel for the man because I'm sure he might have lost his job, but he let me go with a slap on the wrist and my body intact. Got extremely lucky, and now I always use GPS if I'm not at least 75% familiar with the area. Hope he's doing well, I owe him. But I swear something felt off, but in the heat of the moment I was honestly dumbfounded. He seemed more annoyed of me and couldn't wait for me to leave, but I don't really know what was happening on his end. That quote about getting shot at stuck with me as he explicitly told me I'd be terminated. And I don't usually hear cops talk about the FBI investigating, but this is government property, so, I just rolled with it. Also, that Call of Duty died out in a month. It was World War II. Overall, not a worthwhile game. What? That's what you got out of this whole scenario? You were threatened that you were going to get shot by a very angry Australian man who was dressed as a police officer and talking about the FBI and how you could have lost your life. But the last thing that you threw in there is, well, the worst part is that Call of Duty sucked. What? I would say I'm just glad that you're alive. As a teenager, my friend and I were jaywalking. We got to the center divider when a cop drove by, then made a U-turn, and we stupidly started running and ran up into a parking structure. We were on the roof when 3 cop cars came up, surrounded us with weapons drawn, telling us to put our hands up. They asked why we ran, and we said we didn't know, which we really didn't. We just ran. They searched us, and I had some candy in my pocket, which they asked what I was holding. It was gummy bears. They let us go with a warning. I thought I was pretty stupid. Man, how terrible would it be if the cops were like, "And we're going to take this under suspicious activity. Make sure that these gummies aren't filled with anything illegal." Yeah. All right, be on your way. Guys, look, I just got free candy. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot, linked in the description as well. Thanks a lot for watching. See you next time.